long-term, there's no beds in the hospitals.
You're live now.
Okay, now I'll just wait then.
And it is 1 p.m., so we'll call the meeting to order. Welcome.
You're live now.
Okay. Now.
I'm getting feedback, old feedback. Okay, I'll try again here. I'll call the meeting to order. Welcome to the City of Warman's Committee of the Whole meeting for the 16th day of February 2021. I now call this meeting to order. Let's get, first we'll start with a motion to approve the Committee of the Whole agenda. Councillor Seed.
Make a motion to approve the Committee of the Whole agenda for February 16th, 2021 as presented.
Seconder. Councillor Peterson. Anything to add to our agenda? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor? Carried. Okay, we will move down to reports. And we'll start with administration reports. Start with Finance Manager Amanda Rosendal-Hebert. You're on mute.
There we go. I think when I hit start video that the mute should unmute, but I guess it doesn't. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. I have 3 items for your consideration and information at today's meeting. The first item I have is the Deloitte audit plan presentation. So I'll actually refer to Matt, the City of Warman Deloitte partner at this time, to present the audit service plan for the 2020 audit.
Welcome, Matt. There's a few new faces around the table here. We have Councillor Seed, Councillor Ramage, and Councillor Johnson that are new faces to you, Matt. So if any questions after he goes through his report, please ask. Okay, go ahead, Matt.
Sure, and thank you for having me. Would it be helpful to share the screen with the presentation, or do you all have it in front of you? Or I'm not even sure if I can share, but it looks like I could.
We do have it in front of us, and I'm not sure if everyone's got 2 or 3 devices. I have 3 going, so some people probably have 2 or 3 going. But if you have specific things that you want to go over, I would probably say share the screen, and then you're forced us to look at what you want us to see.
All right. Well, I just tried, and I'm not able to, so we'll do it. Kind of an irrelevant question, but we should be able to get through it pretty quickly, just with what I have, as long as you have the document in front of you. So just to make sure everyone has the right document in front of them, it should be marked Deloitte with kind of a colorful globe, City of Warman 2020 audit service plan. Does that look familiar to everybody? Got some thumbs up and nods. Okay, perfect. So I'll just take a minute to introduce myself. So my name is Matt Ledoux. I am the audit partner on the file. Have worked with Amanda and team for quite some time, and with the returning members of the council here as well. So I just wanted to say thank you for having us. What I'll do is I'll go through maybe a page flip of the plan, just for those members who haven't kind of been through the audit process, just to get familiarity with it. I won't dive into too much detail, but if anyone has questions, happy for you to just jump in, raise your hand, or ask questions along. Overall, the audit, so just taking a step back, we meet with management and Amanda early on just to talk about the operations, talk about the year, to see if there's been any major changes to the audit, to the city that would impact our audit plan. And obviously the big one is being COVID, having changes, in a variety of areas. I will touch on a few COVID related matters of how it impacts the audit. However, operationally, the city hasn't really fundamentally changed. There hasn't been a whole lot of new, unusual type of transactions. So the areas of focus plan to be similar to prior years. For many of those who have been part of past audit service plans, no real significant changes, and I'll probably spend a little bit more time just on the highlight of the changes. So looking at your document, I will just go past the cover letter and past the table of contents into the executive summary, which is labeled as page 1 at the bottom left. If you're on a different package, might be a different, but it's just the executive summary. So we're slated to do an audit of the financial statements under public sector accounting, so no change there. Our materiality has held firm from last year, so 680,000. Materiality for the new members is what we compare the any uncorrected adjustments in the financial statements to see if we can issue a clean opinion. In the past, there has been little to no adjustments required. And so the number 680,000 is kind of the threshold we use to see whether we would have to issue a clean or I would have to qualify our opinion. We base it on judgment, but also consider revenues and expenses to help determine that. We realize there's going to be some changes in revenues and expenses, so we will revisit to make sure materiality is set at the right amount, but it is consistent with prior years. And we will report any difference to you at the range of $34,000. So anything above that will be reported to you, consistent with prior years. Our significant audit risks have not really changed from prior years. So we have presumed risk over revenue recognition over government capital grants. With those government grants, they are required to be spent on specific eligible expenditures. So there can be complexity and to make sure that they are spent in accordance with the agreement and not being diverted to spend money on other things so that the funding wouldn't have to be paid back if you didn't spend it on the eligible agreement. So we take a deep dive into that. And then management override of controls is a presumed risk. It doesn't necessarily we suspect or accusing of any fraud or override of controls, but it is a requirement that we look at. So we definitely do procedures and we'll follow up and we'll get the, we will ask the committee whether they're aware of any fraud or anything. So I actually will just pause just to see if there's anything that needs to be brought to the attention of the auditors regarding fraud or control matters that have come to you that the auditor should be aware of. So I'll just pause to see if there's anything there, and I'll regroup, when we provide our year-end plan as well, our findings as well. But I'll just pause. Okay, I'm not seeing anything. I'll continue to move on. The audit fees, the only change really, there's a small inflationary bump, but with the municipal annual expenditure report, that's, I'll say, somewhat new this year, but not really. So we used to audit this years back, and it relates to the gas tax funding that you guys do receive. Because you had sufficient spending in prior years where you had spent all your funding, there was no need to audit it over the past years. So now that that timeline has passed and there's new spending going on, and Amanda will be able to provide you more details on this. The government does require an audit of this. So we had done one in past years and then it wasn't required for a few, and now we're jumping into doing another one. And it is an audit of the specific expenditures that the funding is used for. So not new, but hadn't been done in the last 2 or 3 years. So moving to the page 3, the significant audit risks. I won't spend too much time. I already commented on where the revenue recognition really risk is, and it's with the complexity of the agreements, and the management override of controls is another one where we do specified procedures to help address that. The type of testing and the nature of testing hasn't fundamentally changed. We do ask different questions and poke and prod in different areas, but no real significant changes from prior years. So I don't plan to go through those in detail unless if there's questions.
Any questions? Just going back to the previous one with the fee.
Sure.
There is a substantial, I mean, from a $4,000 difference on so it's over 10%, like the 12-14% difference from last year with the municipal annual expenditure report. And I guess just wanting to understand that completely because.
Sure. So that is actually a completely separate audit itself. So it's not necessarily part of the audit of the financial statements. So almost every municipality is required to send audited expenditure reports, and the expenditure report is fairly simplistic in terms of it doesn't necessarily have as many notes like the financial statements that we do audit, but we do have to take an audit file, plan it, and then we actually issue a separate opinion on this specific piece. And then we have to do procedures at a materiality level specific to that engagement. So the materiality level I mentioned earlier, that's for the general financial statements of the city. So what we will do is, we will have to test the money coming in, and then we will actually test the expenditures and then coordinate those expenditures to make sure that they are eligible and that the projects have received approval to make sure that they're all in line with the agreement. So, and then we will actually take the report, and there's about one or two notes that go with it. And then we actually issue a separate audit opinion on it. So it's not just we'll say a tack on to the audit, is a completely separate audit. And these fees would have been similar to what you would have seen when you had to do the audit. It's just, so most municipalities have to do one each year because you had, we'll say, overspent, but it was just, you had spent the money earlier than usually, you get a funding over X period of time and you spend that funding over time. You had spent on eligible expenditures early on that could be used for the future periods funding received. There was little risk from the government's view that you didn't spend on ineligible because we already had audited those in prior years. So it is a separate complete audit that we have to do, and that one has to be done by March 31st. So the timing even of when we do it is different from when we do the financial statement audit. So it's not meant to reflect on the fee for the audit, which has remained relatively consistent. It is kind of its own separate thing.
Thank you for that clarification. Okay, I'll let you continue.
Okay. So we were just past the significant audit risk and moving to page 5 regarding COVID impacts. So COVID has obviously impacted us in a variety of ways, and in each municipality in different ways as well, depending on the financial strength, the length of shutdowns, the restrictions, the measures, as well as some decisions on, whether there's been deferrals on property taxes pay and whatnot. So various decisions from various municipalities have different impacts. So, some of the things that I'll draw attention to is, during the period of remote working, which wasn't a extensive amount of time compared to other municipalities that we've seen, but one of the things we definitely want to focus on is internal controls. When you're not in person doing the same things, you have different processes and procedures. You want to make sure that there's still those necessary approvals and to make sure that those processes have been updated to reflect changes in the environment. So we will focus on that as well. Other things about collectability of taxes, just with the financial hardships some people have. There's also significant receivables from land developers. So there will be increased focus on certain areas such as that. Make sure the valuation of your tangible capital assets and useful lives hasn't changed if there's been significant stoppage or usage of certain assets. Not necessarily saying there will be, but those are the questions we want to make sure to ask. Make sure that the financial viability of the city is still in good tact, because we know that this has had other significant and real negative consequences to other municipalities. So they're not significant audit risks, but they're definitely areas of focus that could impact the accounting or disclosure depending on the outcomes, but as well as the control environment that we will pay a little bit more close attention to. Regarding how we conduct the audit, we're flexible, so we'll work with Amanda to see what works best. I think, the preference is that we come in as long as it's safe to do so for both parties, and we're flexible to do that. Last year, we were doing this right when it started and had to move remote. But we're flexible to do that. And so that's the only other thing, but more of a management and Deloitte thing that we'll work through as the audit goes on. I'll pause there because that is a big change. Obviously, you know, we're almost a year into it now, but any questions on how our audit is impacted by COVID or any specific matters we want to talk about? And we will, so for the new committee members, as we complete the audit, we also issue a kind of year-end findings report that will circle back on all these issues. If something really significant or material came up during the audit that needed to be brought to your attention, that hasn't happened in the past with the city, we would bring that to your attention sooner, but we will circle back with all these matters at the end with the full report as well. So. The next page just has some COVID resources. You know, our webpage has really good material on, you know, things like smart cities, impacts of COVID on public sector. So there is some guidance for you to look at in case if you're interested, and happy to discuss, you know, other things that we're seeing in our business as well. Moving past page 6, the appendices. Appendix 1 are just required communications. So between today and when we complete the audit, we will have done all of these matters. It's just a checklist of what to expect to go forward, but I don't plan to spend too much time on this. I will spend a little bit of time on Appendix 2, so the audit team. So some of you may have seen some news in over the weekend where there's been a change with Deloitte, where a small subset of our business we decided to divest from. It doesn't impact the audit, our relationship, or the nature of types of services that we give. It really relates to small bookkeeping, very basic compliance services that are. So our team that's going to work with Amanda and group largely remains unchanged. However, some of those clients that are being divested from and sold to Myers Norris Penny, Erica, who was the manager on this file, serves a lot of those clients, and some of the team and staff members that are serving those are moving with those clients over. So unfortunately, we're sad that Erica will be transitioning over as well, but we have a transition place and plan where it won't be disrupted to the audit. Myself and the rest of the team remain intact. It's just the one manager on this file that will change, but no other impacts or changes to our relationship. It's just a different subset of clients and then some of the people who had served those clients. I'll just pause to see if there's any questions on that, but I can assure you that, you know, we have built up a team over the years to make sure that there was transition plans in case if someone left or anything else. So it won't have a significant impact, but I'll just see if there's any questions on that. Okay, hearing none. Next page, on page 10, is just our timing of the audit. Relatively unchanged from prior year. We'll work closely with Amanda and team to make sure that that makes sense to her, but don't anticipate really any significant changes from prior years. So really nothing significant to report on there. And Appendix 4 on page 11, we will start talking to Amanda more frequently on some upcoming accounting standard changes. Nothing that impacts the current year, but there's certain things in here that we'll want to think about early in case if they do have an impact to the city's financial statements, that, you know, management has a plan to try to look at them and address them with our guidance and help to make sure that they're properly accounted for when they do become mandatory. Most of these are a few years away, so I won't spend a lot of time on them. But just to give you a heads up, there are some that may have an impact. And they're more accounting impacts. They don't necessarily change things like certain things like cash flow, but one in particular, I'll give an example, is like asset retirement obligations. If there was buildings or something that the city owned that eventually had to be reclamated, a common one we see is where buildings are full of asbestos, where they need to be properly decontaminated and removed. The city would think about recording a liability for that, for the future event of when that is being done. So that's one of the changes that are things to think about. We'll work with Amanda and team to talk about that as the year goes on and as time passes. But those are some of that's probably the one that's more the hot topic, because it could create a liability. And then the others are more just financial statement disclosure or minor accounting adjustments that don't impact cash flow per se. And Appendix 5 just goes over, there is some auditing standards. Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Richard has a question here.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I can't see hands, so yeah.
Okay, I'll call them out.
Sure, thanks.
Thank you. Well, this year, just a question on PS 3280. This is the landfill liability assessment. So obviously with this year, like we already have this in place, it basically talks about the April 1st, 2021, let's say adoption. We already have that. But in the, let's say right beside it, it said the city will be required to assess the applicability of the standard on its landfill liability. What kind of work are we going to have to do to make sure that we meet that requirement? And pardon me, does that also come into play in 2021, or is that going to be implemented at a later date?
Sorry. Okay. So two things. That is a typo. So the 3280 is the asset and retirement obligations I was referring to. There's a separate standards for landfill, and as we know, you guys don't actually have a landfill. So forget about landfill for the time being. It would go back to the whether there's an asset that has contamination or needs to be reclaimed in the future. But right now, all your waste, like you don't have a landfill per se in the city of Warman. So just to be clear, is that understood?
Well, certainly with this year, let's say, I'm like regarding the actual, products there, with this year, that I do understand, but okay. With the actual landfill that we have recorded on the books, right? And this is the, let's say like the landfill that's not active, right? But there again, we do have that $500,000, say liability, that is certainly
the contaminated site. Yeah.
Does that apply to that site, or are there any changes to that site?
So yes, so that's a good question. So yeah, and forgive me, yes, there's a contaminated liability accrual for that. So the confusing things, there's three standards that are very closely related. The two that are in effect right now would be landfills, which are active landfills, which you don't have. And then there's contaminated sites, and contaminated sites is the one that you're referring to. Now, the third one that's being brought into is asset retirement obligations, which would be this third bucket of assets that aren't a landfill that's in operation, which has its own standard, a contaminated site, which is similar to this, but is what we'll call not in operation. And then the asset retirement obligation would be things that are in operation that may need future reclamation for. So no, there's no significant changes to the standard that helped address that contaminated site, which you have the accrual. With that said, one of the things we always recommend is that we had a discussion on this last year. Although there's no standard changes per se, we always encourage the city to be proactive to say, that 500,000 you have recorded, has there been significant changes? Is there all of a sudden is there actually contamination starting to leak out if it's not being monitored properly? Is there a new site where you had a snow dump where there was lots of chemical and salt that has contaminated the land there? Is there a firing range where they're using lead bullets and now there's lead contamination in the soil that will need to be monitored? So really, although no changes to that specific standard, this one's a different one, but that specific standard, we always encourage management to try to help understand whether there's any significant changes in the site itself or new sites, and whether there's future liabilities to be incurred. But that's part of the normal best practice and requirements of that standard already. So this doesn't necessarily change that, but you're always required to do a fulsome update. And in some cases, we see people get environmental, like an engineering firm to do an environmental report, because the biggest risk is all of a sudden some of these things are worse than originally thought, or the remediation is sooner than originally thought, which creates a cash outflow that you may not have budgeted for. So no particular change to that, but as we encourage regular and prudent monitoring on a regular basis, and doesn't mean annually, but there should be something to think about over a process of time, or whether you have sufficient in-house expertise to assess that. That would be another thing to consider, because some people do have engineers or environmental people that would be able to reasonably assess that in-house. That's something that the city just has to consider. So does that kind of answer the question?
Yeah, and quite honestly, I'm like, that's certainly like a lot of really great detail there. Certainly recognizing like those three categories,
Yeah.
and yeah, so that there's perfect. I now understand where we're going with it, and that kind of thing. So thank you very much, Matt.
Perfect, you betcha. Okay. The other appendices are just more for information. There is one change in the auditing standards on Appendix 5. That's something for us to work through, and it relates to estimates and trying to refine our risk assessment over our key estimates that the city has. So at year end, there'll be a little bit different reporting just on what we did and how we came to the conclusion to be able to form our audit opinion. But aside from that, Appendix 6 has some other resources, but that covers off the main elements of our plan, changes, and things to expect as we go into the year end. So I will pause to see if there's any questions on this or any other matters that I did not touch on.
Any questions? I think we are good, and I think for a lot, it's going through the full cycle. For myself, I know first time of seeing and getting the report back to council, and even having an in-camera meeting after to discuss any concerns. Those things are all a part of the process that I think as people see it all the way through. And yeah. I know Richard's questions brought up some of the ones that are potential liabilities there that are always on the minds of people. So good.
One thing I'll always offer too is, and it's sometimes a better idea in years where there is some new faces in transition, is if there are ways we can help the committee get up to speed on certain areas. So we're more than happy to do so. And I'll say maybe the most common one is, the financial statements will be the next, well, not the next, but the audited financial statements will come for your approval, sometime April, May. And that's something that shouldn't be taken lightly. And one of the things we do is kind of a financial statement 101 course. We realize these are elected positions. Not everyone has the same knowledge and experience with financial statements, but we're happy to carve out some time to give any kind of educational pieces that would be beneficial, because there's some legacy stuff that needs to be probably caught up on. Like the things Richard mentioned are very, very good examples. There's also just to do your duties and fulfill your duties on council. There's probably some things you may not be comfortable with, which Gary, you mentioned it takes time. It takes a few turns to get there. So anything we can do to help, have a think about that. But we always provide it's part of the audit, and it's part of our relationship that whatever we can do to bring value to you or better understanding of certain things, more than happy to do that. So financial statements, things about governance, budgeting, whatever it is, happy to have those conversations. And maybe you can coordinate through Bob or Amanda to let us know if there are certain things, and we'd be happy to come on for a call and do whatever you need to do.
That sounds great. And I think that's really what I was trying to say is as information starts coming to us that we are needing to approve, sometimes we need a little bit more explanation, and I think taking that time will be important during this first run that way. So thanks for that.
Okay.
No other questions. I think we are good. We look forward to working with you over the next few months here.
Well, great. Appreciate the opportunity and hope everyone stays warm. It sounds like it's only a couple more days, but we'll see.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Take care.
Over
Thanks.
to Amanda.
Thank you, Matt. So the recommendation I have is that Deloitte be appointed the auditors for the city of Warman in accordance with the city's act for the 2020 fiscal year at the next regular meeting of council. And then the next item I have in my report is an HR policy amendment. So this is the benefits policy, HR 700, that I'm referring to. And with regards to section 2, amendment of the policy. So just as background information, employees of the city of Warman are responsible for paying short-term and long-term disability premiums. And the city of Warman pays premiums for extended healthcare, dental care, employee and family assistance, group life insurance, vision care, and accidental death and disability. Administration is requesting within section 2 of the benefits policy to state that if an employee is on long-term disability for more than 2 years, that the employee becomes responsible for paying the total premiums for group benefits. This amendment allows the employee to maintain their benefits at their own cost. If the employee returns to work, the city will resume payment of the benefits on the employee's behalf. Also included as an amendment is that after 2 years on long-term disability, the city will pay out any outstanding entitlements. So these are entitlements that are otherwise liabilities on the city's books, and this will remove those liabilities on the financial statements. Within section 5 of the policy, administration would like to revise the entitlement to the $50 end of year gift to include those employees on an approved leave of absence for less than 6 months or on short-term disability. The reason for this is to provide fairness to the entitlement. Under the current wording, an employee could work 11 months out of the year, but go on a leave at the end of November, leaving them no longer entitled to the benefit. However, an employee who only provided services to the city for 1 month of the year would receive the check. So the amendment recognizes employees who have worked for the majority of the year, but are on leave at the end of the year. And the recommendation I have is that the amendments to benefit policy HR 700 be adopted at the next regular meeting of council.
Okay, we'll open that up. Any questions or comments? Councillor Peterson and then Councillor Beck. Yeah.
Overall, I'm okay with the amendments. My question would be around paternity and maternity leave, and that the way the amendments work, basically anyone taking, a full leave wouldn't qualify, and I just would like to see that they wouldn't be excluded. That regardless of whether they are taking the full leave or not, I think it would be prudent to leave them receiving the benefit.
So you are correct. Under the current policy, and even with regards to the requested amendment, somebody on a year leave would not be entitled to the benefit. And that would include a paternity or a maternity leave.
Right, but what I'm saying is I believe we should be allowing them to be entitled to it. That the adjustment should be, I can see someone on a, like, taking a leave with no pay, or something like that, for an extended period for 8-9 months, whether it be for education or something like that, them being excluded from the benefit. But for someone on maternity and paternity leave, I don't believe that should be the case.
Other comments about this, I guess? Councillor Beck was next, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, so, I guess along the same theme, but not just specifically related to maternity or paternity. With this year with your information there on point 2, of your report, it says the city will also pay out any outstanding vacation, banked overtime, and/or EDO hours to an employee. With this year, could that be done within the 2-year time frame if the employee asks for that?
Yes, it would likely affect their whatever claim they could possibly on. It could affect their claim. So most often, if that is going to happen, it happens at the beginning of their claim.
Okay.
But yes, we would have no problem paying that out.
Okay, no, and that there answers my question on that one, so that there's good. With point number 5, with this year, is it with our provider that at 6 months, it's automatically transitioned from short-term disability to long-term disability, disability?
Yes.
It is, okay. Yeah, well, with this year, like, I guess I was just making sure that the timeframes indicated here are similar with our coverage. So, nope, no, that's fine. Thank you.
Other comments, Councillor Ramage.
Thank you, Mayor Philipchuk. Just a question about the use of gradual return to work programs or modified work duties, and how that fits in with the proposed amendments.
We do have a return to work, an early and safe return to work program policy, which is not affected by these amendments. So that policy focuses on disability management, rehabilitation, and safe, timely return to work strategies. And the purpose of the policy is to collaborate with safety promotion, accident prevention, and wellness initiatives through coordination with HR and the employee's direct manager and their physician, to create and manage the return to work for the employee in a safe and timely manner.
Okay. So in the event that anything would go beyond 2 years, that would still be supported by doctor recommendations and within that return to work policy.
You are correct, yes.
Other questions or comments? I guess just one point that I was looking at the entitlement to the benefit of the $50. I don't know how many people we're talking about. I don't know if it's one that, in the spirit of it, if it needs to be, I'm more from the any and all that could be entitled to it. I don't see it as being a major burden in a sense of that way, that and because it's sort of tied to the holiday season and sort of as a gift, I guess I look at it a little bit that way. So it sort of encompasses what Councillor Peterson mentioned too. But I'm just pointing that out. I will go with what the majority of council want, but I feel with something like this, I don't know if that's the one that, if it was a new entitlement or a new something along the way, but it might be one of those ones that for the amount of benefit might not be the amount of spirit that we get, good spirit out of it that we get. So I just pointing that out. Any other questions or comments? Okay, Councillor Ramage.
Thank you. Question on more related to the strategic plan update at the end of the report. What is the status of the capital and operating plan for the wastewater facility upgrades? It mentions in there, I believe, Q3 of 2020. Has that been presented to council?
It has not been presented. Well, so the capital portion of it has been presented to council. It was presented when it was approved through the capital budget. As far as the effect to the operating budget, so strategy has been developed based on what the engineers estimated to be the increase in the operating budget once the system is operational. That portion has not been presented to council yet. As from what I understand, we are a long ways away from the system being operational yet. So we are a ways away from that having effect.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay. Any other questions for Amanda at this point? Councillor Beck?
Yep, thank you, Mayor Philipchuk. So you do also mention the district board of revision, and that's going to be let's say motioned to come back to to council for approval. With this year, the working relationship that there's been good, and also with this year, are we expecting the let's say the rates for for the upcoming year to be much different than what's currently allotted for? and also, for reassessment.
Yeah, that is actually the last item I have on my report. It's the District Board of Revisions. To answer your first part of your question, we had a good working relationship for the last 2 years with the North Sask Board Services. And as for if we would expect to see an increase in fees this year, I guess that will depend on how many appeals we do have. However, you do have to have a reason for the appeal. There has to be a reason for the appeal. So I would say that historically, when there are reasons, SAMA has acknowledged that an error has been made and there's an agreement to adjust prior to it going to the Board of Revisions. So based on historically what we have seen, I wouldn't expect to see a huge increase in cases coming to the District Board of Revision.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other comments about any of manager review here, presentation? Thank you, Amanda. Oh, sorry, Councillor Peterson, almost.
So, I guess Mayor Philipchuk, are we, is everyone on board with asking for a change in regards to 0.5, like both me and Mayor Philipchuk have talked about, or how is that going to proceed at this point?
Well, the way it'll proceed is, I guess we'll go by what the recommendation is. I haven't heard a majority wanting to change it, so it'll come at the next council meeting as presented. And then if there's going to be changes, that would probably be where it is, unless I see the spirit of it changing amongst the crew here. Okay. Any other questions for Manager Rosenthal Hebert? You like that?
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. We will move on then to City Manager Smith.
Thank you, Your Worship, and members of council. So the purpose of my report is just to get City Council's comments on the 10-year capital plan for 2021 to 2031. As you are aware, each year we develop a new 10-year capital plan for council's consideration. Our intent was to provide the report for the next committee of the whole meeting, which will be March 15th, but also with the intent of having our strategic planning session in late March. I was just looking for council's direction if they wish to have the 10-year capital discussion at the March 15th meeting, as would be our normal process for that discussion, or if they wish to wait until after the strategic planning session was performed. Certainly we're good either way. Just wanted to provide council with some of the pros and cons of waiting until after the planning session. And that's why my recommendation is to maybe wait until after the strategic plan is performed, as it may give council an opportunity to include some of the initiatives that they might be looking at over the next period of their term and longer, to place those into the 10-year capital plan earlier than waiting until next year for the next capital plan to come along. And again, entirely up to council. Just thought it was a good time to discuss it rather than waiting until the March 15th meeting when it would be presented and then having that discussion of whether we should wait or not wait. So just looking for direction before we present something at the March 15th, or if it wants to be delayed till after the strategic planning. And again, we're good either way. Just threw it out there for council's direction.
Okay, thank you. And I have Councillor Beck, then Councillor Johnson. Councillor Beck.
Yeah, so specifically regarding, let's say the 10-year capital plan, this, for me, I would like it to, to come to the next committee of the whole meeting. First of all, this would serve as a really, really good, let's say review prior to going into any strategic plan. Also with that there, it could be, let's say, presented, let's say by yourself and with the support of your managers as to, hey, you know what, this is our current plan. right? We can review that. And then with this year, we can also talk about changes, let's say any changes or recommendations from the managers in terms of saying, hey, you know what, based on current, let's say assessment, let me pick on the fire department, rather than year 9 of a replacement for, let's say for item, that has been identified, that there could be moved up, let's say a year or 2 years, based on current assessments. That way there, all of that would be done prior to going into our strategic planning session. So, with this year, to unpack that and to kind of get us into that thought, frame and whatnot, I would like it to see, certainly like it in that particular manner where we're dealing with what's current, any changes recommended by the managers. That way there are strategic planning day. Then with this year, we know exactly where the organization and our managers are in terms of their thinking and their current assessments. And then with this year, we can go into the strategic planning for any, that might, let's say, result from there. So that's how I would like to see it happen. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll continue on with Councillor John because those were more comments than a question. Councillor Johnson.
Okay, so I was just based on the report, it seems like and sounds like that there's some maybe pressing issues that need to be looked at sooner than later. So I was kind of flipping and flopping because I know that the city's done an amazing job of planning and putting money aside, but I think that there's some definite needs with infrastructure and some like looking at vehicles replacement. Chief Austin and through Jason Weeb was saying too that there's some definite needs that take precedent. So it might be I in the same line with Richard, what are some pressing things that we need to make sure that we can uphold, the standards that we've set and to keep public works moving smoothly, cleaning those streets and whatever they need to have. So it would be a good idea to maybe see, do we need to be putting some money here right away? Or can that wait to the strategic planning session?
Okay, thank you. Councillor Ramage.
Thank you, Mayor Philipchuk. So just a bit of a timeline so that if I understand this correct, based on what I've gone back and seen, is February 2020, there was a capital plan presented that would increase taxes 4%. At the time, council requested administration to come back and look present what a 1% increase option would be. Then we go forward to January 12th of this year, and when we were doing our budgeting session, and there was 2 recommendations that were put forward. One at 2% and the recommendation at 1.6%. So now we get to February, skip back for a second. When we were having the conversation about the capital and operating plan at the budget meeting, from what I recall, the statement was that yes, 1.6 is tight, but we're okay. The managers have done an incredible job of spreading things out and making this work. But then we get 4 weeks later and we're hearing that it's extremely challenging and we should be delaying this. So I guess I'm wondering, the first question I have is, when did administration flag this as a problem?
I can certainly answer that. So it's 2 different documents really is what we're looking at. So the one that was presented that you're speaking of for the 2021 capital budget. So that's a one-year budget that goes along with our operating plan. So that's how we paid for things for just this year. What I'm talking about, or what we're discussing here, is a 10-year plan. So that goes far out into the future, as you can see. And there's lots of things that might be needs, wants. We go through all that stuff. So in 2000, so I guess I want to leave it at that for the one comment or the one question is, One is just for the 1 year. That's the one that you're talking of. And we had indicated that, yes, it was tough, but we got to what the direction was back in 2020. At this time, we were doing a 10-year capital plan and we brought it forward. It had a 4% increase to kind of get all those wants, needs, everything of the managers and what direction council had provided at that time. And it was felt that we should look at a 10-year capital plan with maybe not a 4% increase, but something more reasonable for the taxpayers, which we get. And so then we just moved capital purchases around over the next 10 years to kind of make that balance, knowing full well that we would be, presenting to council a 1% increase for our capital budget for 2021. So that's what we did, still based on the direction from this time last in 2020. I guess that's why the discussion around whether you wait till after the strategic plan, whether we bring something forward now, we can certainly have that discussion. But some council members might feel that no, we want to actually increase taxation more to get to the 4% to have all these things, or maybe they'll say somewhere in between for the long term, so that we know next year coming in we're looking at, yes, more expenditures, more finances required for our 2000 and what would be the 22 budget next year. So I hope I'm articulating that okay, that one is the one that we passed was for the 1 year, and this is for a 10 year. So there's a significant difference. One is more strategic, planning for the future, and one is just for that current year.
Okay, appreciate that. I think the one thing that I do support in your report is having the appropriate reports, whether that's a business case or not, from the senior managers for future operating and capital requests. I think those come in handy, even if we are developing the capital plan for 1 year, to understand what the longer term impacts are over the longer term horizon. And I think I support that in your recommendation. I think that's information that would be very valuable for council to have.
Yeah, and they're working on that right now, and there'll be a portion of that in with on March 15th as well, if that's the direction we go, rather than waiting till after the strategic plan. And if I guess we look at it, kind of that longer term after a strategic plan, there might be some initiatives that this council wants to put forward, or direction or vision, that we can now change our 10-year cap, or we could change the 10-year capital plan basically a year earlier, if that makes sense. Because otherwise we would be waiting till this time next year to implement a 10-year capital plan with those initiatives.
Mm-hmm. I think just where I'm at right now, and I'll put some more thought to it, but the 5-year capital plan that would be submitted to the province, right now I don't see the need to delay that, and maybe I just need to put some more thought, some more discussion around that. But I wouldn't, at this point, I wouldn't support delaying it, but I would support getting those business case reports for operating and capital expenditures.
Yeah, and I just wanted to be transparent with that there is a potential con of delaying, and that's really the only one, is that the province looks to having a plan by March 30th, although the penalty is that you would need to have that plan submitted before you received revenue for grant funding of for the municipality, which we don't see any till July. So it wouldn't be an issue, but I wanted to highlight that it is a criteria established by the ministry, and so I just wanted to make sure that you guys were aware of that as well when making this decision or direction for us.
Thank you. We have Councillor Peterson, then Councillor Seed.
Much to my wife's chagrin, I am not one who likes to duplicate work. So I don't see why we would do this exercise twice by looking at it at the next committee of the whole, and then again at the as part of the strategic planning session, because the strategic planning session is where we're really going to do the work that's going to have the most impact on how that 10-year capital plan looks. So you could have the discussion all you want at the committee of the whole, and then completely and utterly change the 10-year plan 2 weeks later at the strategic planning session. It doesn't make sense to me for us to do the work twice. I think we're far better off spending our time on other issues at the committee of the whole, and then doing it right when we do the strategic planning session.
Okay, Councillor Seed.
Just a couple of comments in general. I would like to see it presented sooner than later. For me personally, the reason for that is being a new counselor, the more information that I can have and the longer I can take to digest it and go through it, I think gives more opportunity for me to be able to question certain items or get clarity, I should say, as opposed to questioning. I'm definitely, I guess, an opposite view, but I'm definitely a fan of having that information. When it comes down to the capital plan for 10 years, quite frankly, I don't care if we go through it 5 times. I want to make sure that we get it right. So I would definitely like to see it a couple of times. And I have some questions about it that maybe not for right now, but going forward, doing research based on my council lead right now, as far as protective services is concerned, is even going back and looking at archives as far as 2014 and seeing what was set forth in capital planning, whether 5 years or 10 years or anything like that. I see some very dramatic changes in numbers, and I'm going to be looking for some clarity on some of that. I'll give you specifics, Bob, because I don't expect you to answer them right now, because obviously it's not, that would be completely unfair. But that's why seeing this information as soon as possible is very, very important to me, because I just see numbers that just don't add up to me. I'm hoping I'm just missing something very simple, but I see some allocation, particularly of reserve funding, which I brought up before, that on these reports, in my opinion, has disappeared. And I just want to find out where it's been reassigned. So by seeing the reports, as Councillor Ramage mentioned, about, this is what, I'm going to pick on Russ just because it's with protective services. This is what he wanted originally based on this percentage. Okay, no, you can't have that because we're using 1% or 1.6 instead. Great, so here's my revised report, and then clearly laid out, here's what I've cut out. This is why, because then as a council, we may want to look at it and say, you know what, actually, we do really need that. So there is a possibility that we need to revisit that 1.6 or whatever the case is. So I understand the struggles that are happening with the management team, but I would certainly want to understand as a council, what is it that we're losing by sticking with that, and how is it going to affect our community in a long term? Because I love the fact of looking ahead 10 and 20 years, because it'll just set us so much farther ahead than living, year by year or every couple of years. So I'm a fan of seeing the reports, but I would certainly like to see what items have been omitted as well across the field, and so we can better understand what those cuts are impact or how they're impacting the management team. Thank you.
Other comments? I think I just want to comment a little bit to Councillor Seeds, just what came out of February 2020 and why some of the direction from 4% to 1%. We did not want to have council sort of commit to over 10 years, 4% a year, which is 40% increase to the tax base. At that day, we were making a decision. So we said we were okay with a 1% increase, which is still 10% over 10 years, and more as needed, as demonstrated by need along the way. So I get that it's nice to have, but it's also explaining that we are saying 4% is a base, plus we're adding whatever else we need for operations or anything else that we are committing to, or that we are saying that plan everything with capital based on that. So just, I guess, just to realize that that was part of the decision making last year at this time, that 1% would be an absolute, that we would have as capital, others as requested and as needed, as presented through all the way through. I realize that's a harder thing to plan for management, but it's also less of a guaranteed commitment by council of those substantial gains without that current year evidence along the way. So I wanted to give perspective on some of those, because I think it's easier to say if we have those major increases, we can have all these things, but the major increases have to also be justified. You know, if it's the 1 year, that's, you can justify, but if we're planning for 10 years from now, that has a difference. Councilor Ramage.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for Mayor Philipchuk, and I would absolutely agree with your comments, and Councillor Seeds. I think we need to understand what the omissions of the budget are based on that difference between a 1, 2, or 4%, both from a technical and safety standpoint, but also from what kind of community are we envisioning in a community level of service. So I think that's where these reports are very important for council to make those decisions.
Perfect. And that's it, like all these reports, they're current on the day they're handed out, but then they're already old the day after. And I mean, we sort of saw the extreme with COVID, how things changed, but I agree with you that I think probably we're best getting it in. And the nice thing about this, I was talking to Manager Smith about this, that the nice thing, this is getting everybody talking about capital, talking about budgets, talking about, you know, HR, talking about operations, all those things that come into play. At least it's raising the level up instead of saying, I don't really understand. So I see the benefit of having this discussion this way. And that's why I thought a committee of the whole is perfect for this. And it gives everybody, because every time we make a decision not to fund, there's a consequence to that. But then there's a consequence to say that okay, we will fund it at this level this year. So we have to, it's that balance. That's why we were elected in, to make those decisions along the way. So I appreciate it coming to the table, but I think it's probably best that what I'm hearing is that it comes back and we get it in on time, because that's the current report we have right now. And then it sort of builds us up that we've had the conversation at the next committee of the whole, but then it really leads us well into strategic planning to say, boy, we really need this and this. Are we missing out on some things if we don't fund them? How are we going to fund them? What are we committing to? Okay.
Yep, appreciate the direction. That's exactly what I was looking for, is some comments around. I didn't want to bring something forward that somebody would be questioning later as to, well, why wasn't this done after the strategic plan? So that's the total purpose of my report, is just looking for some direction for the next meeting. And I appreciate all the comments. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Any progress with strategic planning? Any possible dates yet, or?
So far, it's looking like it's going to be at the, most of the consultants that have got back to me have indicated that the last week in March seems to be about the best that they can do from their perspective, and I'll be bringing that to the meeting as well, to the next committee of the whole for discussion.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, we will move down then to Public Works. Jason.
Good afternoon. It might be really bright. There's a natural gas break in our alley. So I have the window open so I can get all the heat I can. Our gas is currently off. So I'll just be moving it probably out of the sun here as we go. We've had quite the interesting winter so far with our big snowfall there in November, and then January has been really mild. Into February, it's really cold, and that's probably why I'm suspecting this gas line was broken here. The frost is driving down pretty hard right now. Staff are still having issues with residents having some of their bins left on the streets prior or after pickup for their area. So we just like to remind residents to ensure that the carts are removed from curbside immediately after garbage recycling pickup in order to accommodate snow removal. Our staff have been going the extra mile, climbing out of equipment and moving the bins onto the driveway for them in some circumstances, unless they're really pressed for time, but try to do that extra bit of work. We've also, on my opening page there, we are considering Sourcewell. It's new to us. It was introduced to us last year, mentioned to us. So we are looking at using Sourcewell as an opportunity this year for purchasing equipment. So taking it slow and easy, we'll see how that works. We did do the capital purchase of the half-ton truck. I did complete that. I know there was a question there from Doug Ramage on the weekend. And I just sent requests out to the dealerships, just generic, I guess, through the websites, just requesting also municipal and fleet pricing. Came back with the Dodge Ram being the least expensive truck out of the bunch. I did entertain some smaller trucks, just thought, well, maybe something we can do to save some money, save some fuel costs. But when I looked at the combined fuel economy on these trucks, we're only saving a couple miles per gallon, which isn't really, and you're also, you can't tow as much. You can't do as much with a smaller truck as you can with a larger. So we talked with my supervisors, and we feel that it's best to stick with a full-size truck. So that's complete, which the deadline or the delivery date is, I think, 3 months away. Some dealerships had no trucks available. We had to wait till May to order 2022. So I guess there's a bit of a boom in truck purchasing. Utilities department, so far to date, we have had calls of frozen water lines, et cetera, and they've all been in-house so far. We haven't had any frozen in the ground, but we do anticipate that coming our way with this 2-week cold spell we've had. There was another hydrant repair and a storm pump repair that we had planned on doing during the winter months, so it's ready to go for summer. Transportation, I guess the main thing there, we continue to use the liquid salt. Happy with that product. Of course, when it's this bitterly cold, we use pea gravel just to try and bite into the ice and snow a little more, because it's too cold for the liquid salt to work. Traffic signals update. Gave some pictures there. It was interesting to see City of Saskatoon's test room there. They actually have boxes that are on intersections, and they can test these devices, which is a huge, to me, it's great, because now they can take our control box from on our street and bring it into their test office there and test it right on site, which is only, City of Saskatoon's half an hour away or less. So really looking forward to this. They seem very knowledgeable, and like I mentioned, they're very transparent. So we're looking forward to that. They haven't done work yet. They'll be sending us estimates and quotes prior to doing any work, but they're going through everything and have noticed some programming issues and etc. A little bit of first aid training. We'll have more in September. We're still trying to proceed with training staff through the COVID times. There's the conferences and stuff are shut down due to we can't gather with a lot of people, but doing what we can to keep our staff up to date and trained. And that is it for my report.
Thank you, Jason. Councillor C, question or comment?
Just a real quick question here for you, Jason, and not to delve into it too much, but when I'm looking at the recommendation for the Dodge truck, I completely understand what you're saying about you got to look at overall towing and things like that. And I understand that there's extremely limited availability right now. I'm just wondering about some of the packages that are put on there, like if there's a cost differential for the command start, heated seats, heated steering wheel, things of that nature. Like, they're all great luxuries. There's no question about it. We all love it. But is it something that is, I mean, if it's a $200 cost extra, it's no brainer. I mean, why wouldn't it be, right? But if we're talking about $1,500 or $2,000, I just question, with all of us kind of tightening our belts a little bit, is that something that we need? And if it's one of those things of, look, they don't have anything else, I get that. I completely understand that. But just questioning as to whether it was looked at a little bit with, like, this is a Longhorn edition is kind of the Cadillac of Dodge. So I was just curious as to whether we need all the bells and whistles that are going to be associated with that truck.
Okay, so this is an SXT. So the trucks that are in our fleet, like there's 3 of those Sportsmen. So this sits underneath that model. It's not, we have a one-step model underneath that, which is was an SLE or something like that. And this is a little step above that, but it's underneath our Sportsmans that we purchased there a few years ago in 2014, 2015. So it's not the Longhorn, I understand, edition.
Sorry, I misspoke, yeah.
Yep. No, just I totally understand what you're saying. I don't know what the cost of this exact separation would be. I just essentially asked for, similar to the trucks that we purchased in the past with Dodge, is kind of what I said in the email, because these trucks, they gave us a fantastic deal on back in 2014, 2015. So I was looking for the similar package, which we could not get any longer. So I said, no, that's fine. We'll go with something less. And then he said, well, this SXT has a sub-zero package. And we have put command starts on our trucks since 2014. I think other departments have as well. And it's just a nice feature to have for the staff when they're on call, to hit that, have that truck ready to go when they get out the door. So we've been putting aftermarket ones on, which they haven't been overly great, not bad in some cases, but this came part of that whole package, just came all together. So I'm sorry, I can't tell you exactly what the breakdown of that cost was.
No, that's fine. And I guess just to respond, I guess I was thinking more of it being into city yards and people going in and then not understanding why they would need to use a command start. It makes entirely more sense if it's sitting at their house because they're on call and they get a call and they got to go out to start it on the driveway. That makes complete sense to me. I was just questioning as to, I mean, obviously it's kind of a luxury package, but if that was just sitting at the city yards and somebody has to show up anyways to get it going, the command start kind of defeated the purpose. But I understand now. So thanks for the clarity.
Yeah, no problem.
Other questions or comments? Councillor Ramage.
Thanks, Mayor Philipchuk. And thanks, Jason, to you and your team for all the work you did during our winter hurricanes with all the clearing of the streets and sidewalks. Really appreciated and noted. I just wonder if there's an opportunity to work alongside Aaron in terms of getting some communication out to residents when there's plowing going on or that snow removal. Maybe there's an opportunity to work with Aaron and get some communications out to help remind residents and then help support your team.
Yes, we actually do that already. We notify residents. We have Aaron on our email, and both my supervisors and myself, we do contact her, both in regards to bins. I think we recently had her post that as well. And especially with streets that are narrow, like Martin's area, Redwood, there's some narrow streets there that we can't just go and clear anywhere like we used to be able to. It's just vehicles on the streets, it's too tight. So those areas, we always give notification. We have barricades we put up with dates of the week when we're doing it. So we definitely utilize Aaron to be our social media person to help us out.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Any other questions or comments? So how long does it take to get one of those natural gas breaks fixed?
They tell me all day. All day. So we went and picked up a heater just in case, because we do have water and whatnot in this building as well. So the building is older. The older piece is just brick. There is no insulation. So we rented one of these diesel heaters that we can set up on a man door if need be. After this meeting, I'll go check and see how things are, but the supervisors, I trust they're taking good care of it.
Sounds good. We'll continue letting fire and recreation look after fireworks and not you guys. So thank you. We'll move on to planning. Manager Toth.
Thank you, Mayor Philipchuk, members of council. A few items for discussion today. I'll start with my preamble, just give a bit of a quick summary. Reeve Harwood was appointed as the new Regional Oversight Committee Chair for 2021. This was done at the last ROC meeting, which was held in January. Mayor Philipchuk and I continue to attend the meetings regarding the Saskatoon Freeway project. I'm on the technical committee and Mayor Philipchuk's on the steering committee. As mentioned, the main priority areas, I guess, specifically more geared towards Warman, have kind of been discussed, but there is some information on the website if council is interested in checking out a bit of a summary of what's happened to date. We've signed the agreements for the de-sledging, and work will begin as soon as kind of weather allows for that. I'm anticipating working with finance here in the next week to put in our first claim. The claim will basically be just for work. Most of it's been engineering done to date. And we'll make those probably biannual, depending on kind of how many invoices and the amount outstanding. We'll kind of make a submission when needed. We're currently working on an all-inclusive waterworks policy, which will deal with everything from cost to install a service connection, the methods to deal with multifamily developments, to the type of pipe and method of construction when doing a service connection. We're doing this work internally in terms of putting the policy together. However, where appropriate, our engineer will take a look to ensure our specs are correct, as well as Public Works and the Utilities Department is working with me to make sure that kind of all of our specific areas are covered off within that policy. We have been approached by a church who's looking for some additional parking. we're having some issues rectifying this in the zoning bylaw, and I'm not sure it's something that will even end up coming to council at the end of the day, but I did want to mention it just as we're kind of looking through the zoning bylaw and kind of determining how we could perhaps approach this and bring a recommendation to council one way or the other. We've also been approached with the preliminary proposal for Lone Court. This is the cul-de-sac on the west end of Central Street, which was originally zoned for 4 apartment buildings. The developer is looking at some different options. They are aware of the multi-unit purpose-built rentals policy, which we just passed, but are feeling like probably more feasible for them to go in a bit of a different direction with kind of a live-work option that they've seen in some of their travels. We're just kind of compiling some information regarding that, and we'll hopefully bring something back a little more concrete to council here in the next while. And then just in terms of bylaw, the cold weather's, I guess, kept animals inside a little more. We've had kind of a reduction in the number of animals that we've been picking up, and thus currently we have no animals in our pound, which is good news. So I don't know if there's any questions about the preamble before I go on, or just keep going.
Just wait, we'll see if there's any questions or comments. I look forward to seeing more about those plans on Lowen. I mean, it's so many things go through my mind. I don't want a storage area, but I can see a live work type of place, and it has to fit in the area completely. So it's one of those ones that will be like an acreage, or will it be more like an industrial or light industrial, whatever it might be as a business. So curious to see what'll come back there for sure. Councillor Johnson, then Councillor Beck.
Yeah, I just got a couple questions. So with the Lowen Court, is that like, are they looking at something similar to the Avitech businesses on the bottom and a couple rental places, or?
No, they're thinking something along the lines of more single-family residential, but built in a way that, say, if you're a contractor or you maybe have a smaller manufacturing business, that you could do it within a detached or an attached garage. And the way, I guess, or the reason they're looking at this as a potential there is because the number of residential lots that they'd get on that cul-de-sac, they'd end up being quite large. So they'd have space for, they're looking at maybe minimum 1,200 square foot garage, and kind of any of that, you could be anything from a painter to metalwork could be done within that space, but not in the sense of multifamily. This would be single family homes with large garages, basically. Large garages or shops attached to them.
Okay. And I just had another question like that, the sewage lagoon. So as far as that, there's the landowner that is there issues there that it seems like this has been a couple times that it's been brought up. So I'm just kind of wondering, is there potential that he pulls the pin, or what does a win-win situation look like for him and us?
I don't think so. The 3 landowners that are kind of in question, we've met with all 3, the engineer and myself. All 3 definitely see the benefit of the project, want to do what they can to help us get through it. With this one, it's quite a large operation that they've got going out there, and I think it's more just them kind of checking their boxes to make sure that there's nothing outstanding. They've got their lawyers kind of reviewing the agreement and those types of things. So we may get some comments back about some additional conditions they want to see within those agreements, but I'm not seeing anything right now that would make me think that there's any reason that it won't go through.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
No problem.
Councillor Beck.
All right, thank you. And, I certainly thank Tracy for her question, because that there was one of my questions there. Let's say what potential impact to timeline and extent of that. So I think you answered that fairly well. With this year, you did also mention the all-inclusive waterworks policy with this year. So it's, and let's say the reason for that was to avoid confusion about connecting to city water and our infrastructure. Could I just ask what's being misunderstood right now? Is it rates? Is it requirements? Or what kind of background can you give me?
No, so I guess mainly what I'm referring to there is most of the, I don't know if confusion was even maybe the right word to include there, but some of the areas that we run into some issues with is when we're dealing with multifamily, so anything more than one unit. And it's just putting into policy what we've typically done in practice, which is if you want individual bills, you need one curb stop or curb valve per unit, basically, which gives us the option to turn the water off in an instance where we wouldn't have payment on a bill. If you don't want to go to the expense of including a separate curb stop for every unit, there is always the option of one bill. And we have certain situations in Warman where different condo developments will get one bill for the entire development. And it's on the condo association to either charge in their fees appropriately, or in some situations, they've added in their own metering system so that they can determine how much each unit is actually spending. And then basically charge back appropriately to those units. So confusion might be the wrong word. I guess maybe it's more just about putting what we've done in practice into policy. Although I will admit that with some of our first multifamily developments, there was maybe a little bit of misunderstanding in terms of, you know, some of the effects that having that one curb valve put into a larger development what that may cause, I guess, down the line in terms of some headaches for the condo association and trying to divvy out some of that stuff. So it's just making sure that all of that's clear to developers before they start building.
Okay, so this won't actually be like a new policy coming into place. This is just kind of a document to assist the developer in making sure that our interests are going to be satisfied with what they build. Is that correct?
Yeah, correct. And it'll be taking a couple of different policies, most likely, and incorporating them under one comprehensive policy, so that if someone does come to develop in Warman, we're not giving them a utilities policy, you know, a connection policy and something else. It'll all be kind of contained under this one policy.
So are we actually going to merge all let's say all three of those and then pass that as its own waterworks policy rather and then basically like eliminate let's say like the things there that we don't need?
Yeah, there will be the ability, I think, to get rid of at least one, if not two policies after we adopt this policy. And there'll be a combination of stuff brought in from those two existing policies, and then also some new stuff which we don't currently have under any policy right now.
Okay, excellent, thank you.
Any other questions about the preamble? We'll let you continue then.
Sure. Good news here on the permit number front in terms of January, at least. Obviously, the value of construction is way up year over year. Main reason for that is, again, the Shoppers Drug Mart permit, which pushed those values significantly up. But definitely you see kind of, you know, directly how those bigger commercial projects play into overall value of construction and how easily those can get pushed up. Unfortunately, I was unable to get up-to-date real estate numbers for this month, but I will have an update on January and February at the next committee of the whole. Provided some update to the CN whistle cessation. I know this is something on council's radar. We recently sent a letter to CN with some of our concerns just in terms of timelines and how long it's kind of taken to get some certainty in terms of if we do X, you know, will CN allow us to have whistle cessation or endorse whistle cessation moving forward? I've provided kind of a bunch of information there. I'm sure there's going to be some questions on this one. So maybe I'll just, if it's okay with you, Mayor Philipchuk, open it up for discussion.
Any questions about this one or comments? Councillor Seed, then Councillor Beck.
Brad, thanks for the update on some of the, I guess, concerns that CN has. It seems like it's a never-ending list of, you know, oh, everything's great, but now you got to do this, now you got to do this, now you got to do this. Looking at an estimated cost of $18,000 to $20,000 to put up basically the fence and reduce the grade there, I would personally, I know it's just for information right now, but I would be completely in support of that. There's a huge push from citizens that I've spoken to about, you know, just making this happen. And there's a view that incorrectly, in my opinion, that council is dragging their feet on it, which we're not. It clearly is coming from CN, but I think that I would want a little bit of even unofficial assurance from them that, like, look, at what point do we call enough's enough, right? Like, what else do we need to do here to make sure that this is going to happen? Because it seems like they keep coming back with more and more and more, unless I'm mistaken. But I appreciate what you put in here. It looks good. And I think that, yeah, I'd be a huge fan of moving forward on it. So thank you.
Yeah, and City Manager Smith and myself, obviously, know the importance of this and didn't see the dollars as maybe the big outstanding issue. It was more, we just wanted council to be aware of, if we do this, it doesn't necessarily 100% guarantee, we'll get what we want after. I think the chances are fairly good. And I'd say, greater than 50%, but just with our experience with CN, that goalpost seems to keep moving. So I just never want to say anything 100%.
It's a point well taken there, Brad, because I think just even talking to some of the other city mayors, that's the challenges they've been finding. Councillor Beck.
Yeah, thank you. So just a question around the 5-foot chain link fence. Is the 5-foot requirement theirs, or should we consider 6?
So what happens is basically when we looked at this whistle cessation, the last big step that we had to take was getting an engineer to put together basically a review of the 2 intersections and what outstanding issues they had or they saw with the intersections looking at CN's regulations. And the big concern, or one of the big concerns that came back, was security through that kind of whole area. CN, and this is where we'd love more direction, if CN would come in and say, build a 6-foot fence, you'll be good, we would be happy. Unfortunately, CN doesn't even recommend what we need to change. All we do is basically looking at that report and the recommendations within it, what needs to be solved. We propose different solutions to the outstanding issues. And those are kind of the main 3 outstanding issues. And when we sat down with Ms. Vergata from CN, that's City Manager Smith and myself, and actually their train local supervisor was there with her as well. We did talk about the 5-foot chain link fence, and they didn't have any concerns with the height. It wasn't like they said, no, you better do 6. They felt, and again, this is somewhat off the record, but felt that 5-foot would deal with the security concern aspect of the report that AECOM put together for us, if that makes sense. Sorry.
And just a second question. So with this here, is it only one 5-foot fence that would be required, or would it be one on either side? Because like there again, if you put a fence on one side, it doesn't stop anybody from coming in from the other side and then walking down. And whether or not that is included in let's say like the numbers, like your fence pricing, is that just for 1 or is that for 2?
Brad, you froze with a smile on your face that's that is telling me that it's probably more, probably 2.
Mayor Philipchuk, it just goes to show that my comments can sometimes be funny, so I'd like to recognize that. Thanks.
Okay.
I can maybe try answer that, Your Worship, if you wish.
I think Manager Toth is back here, so we'll let him.
Okay.
And thank you for that.
I am back, but I actually didn't hear the question. So if Manager Smith can handle it. Maybe.
Okay. Yes. Sorry
about that.
It was just whether it was going to be one chain link fence or whether it would be one on each side of the tracks. The discussion that we had with them was basically what they're trying to solve. Brad had mentioned that it's security, but it's trespass really is. So they don't want anybody to cross the tracks. So they're only requiring one side right now, right? I say that right now because we can put that forward and then they could say we want one on either side. But their concern is the trespass of people going to in between, let's say 6th and actually all the way to, or from industrial past 6 over to lift station number 1. I'll just say that for now. And it's just to stop the trespass of pedestrians going across there. So they have indicated to us that the 1 would be sufficient. And as Brad had mentioned, we could put it in and then they could say 2, but right now it's just 1.
Yeah, that's 100%. And they were thinking too, like basically cutting off the shortcuts. So the odd time you'll get someone who maybe cuts across the tracks halfway between 6th and industrial. And even if you have the fence on only one side, that prevents most of that from happening just because you're going to have to go to one end of the tracks or the other anyways to get around the fence.
Yeah, I know students were taking shortcuts that lived over on that east side when they were watching it along the way. Councillor Peterson was next.
As much as I agree with Marshall C that if it would just cost us $18,000 and we'd be done, I'd be all for it. But as Manager Toth has said, this has been a moving goalpost, and I don't trust CN. I have no problem putting that in writing, putting that out there. I don't trust CN. They have not been forthright. They have not been honest. They have not said, here's what you need to do. And I think unless we have them in front of us at a committee of the whole meeting where we can talk to them and ask questions and deal with it, until then, I am not okay with spending another dime on this project because I don't trust CN.
Councillor Seed.
Just as a thought as we were talking here, and I think this goes without question, Manager Toth and for City Manager Smith, but I would also encourage that if we do end up moving forward with the fence, just to have a very informal discussion with Chief Austin as well, just regarding with the dangerous goods that are coming through in such our city. Plan for the worst, hope for the best, but keeping in mind some access through whether it be gates or anything like that could be opened by the fire department in the event of emergency. I may add some very small cost to it, but just having some breaks that, particularly with our city being broken apart by the tracks now, that if there was an incident on the tracks and they needed to access from the side with a fence, I'd just be mindful that there would be a gate or something. I know ultimately they could just knock down the fence if they had to, but maybe even potentially for maintenance, it would just be ideological to have a couple of access points through that fence as well, just as a thought.
Yeah, no, definitely point well taken. And I know Manager Smith had come in and chatted with me the other day just about that specifically, that if we do go with the fences, make sure we've got some gate options or some breaks in there for maintenance, but also emergency services.
Any other questions? And just a comment to Councillor Peterson's. I understand the frustration because I've been a part of that all the way through. But the challenge for them is the liability. When nothing happens, you can do whatever you want. But it's when something happens, they don't want something down in writing that was enough necessarily. And they've also got probably moving goalposts with their insurance company. So I'm guessing that's the reason they don't want to lock themselves into something. But by all means, if they could come to a meeting, that would be great, but I know the level that we would probably get would not be the decision makers that we would need. So that's always going to be the challenge. I guess you've heard from our team here. I guess what's next, we can, I guess you and Manager Smith can talk a little bit about that, what we can do as far as having those communications. I know I reached out at SUMA to have a conversation there, and I've done it at FCM. So I've actually talked to the top people, but again, it seems to move for them all the time. And I sense the frustration and I get it. Manager Toth, you can continue on then.
No, I was just going to say, and if we do end up moving forward with this, we'll have a chat administratively. But if we do, we probably, right before we do anything, send one last letter to CN with this is exactly what we're doing, even if it doesn't garner, okay, you'll get whistle cessation. I think it's good that we at least put down on paper one last time exactly what we'd be doing. So I will chat with Manager Smith after the meeting, and we'll come up with a bit of a game plan on how to move forward.
Thank you.
The next item for discussion is animal control bylaw amendments. We've just been looking at the animal control bylaw in relation to some others around the province, specifically with the addition of our dog park. There was, in our opinion, or the bylaw's opinion, some provisions that were maybe missing due to that. So we've made some changes. I've kind of listed high level what the changes are and then included a copy of the bylaw for council's information.
Any questions or comments about that one? I think we can move on.
Sounds good. The next item, which would also be coming to council, is a sump pump bylaw amendment. Basically, these two additions to the sump pump, we feel, again, one is putting kind of practice into policy, and the other is more kind of related to some of the requirements in other policies or existing legislation. This is just kind of bringing the sump pump bylaw up to kind of today's standards. With redirecting from back to front, that's mainly done just in terms of a maintenance or landscaping type situation, and we try to avoid it where we can.
Okay, Councillor Johnson had her hand up first.
So just regarding that sump pump, switch to the backyard. So I live by Neil Wagner Park and there's some sump pump drainage in there. And I have taken some pretty nasty falls because of the drainage and the slip in the cool weather. So that's where my concern would be. I completely agree that we need to abide by, and update our rulings. But in those situations, is there something else that can be done? Is there another solution that we can kind of come up with in those situations where the drainage is coming into our ponds and across walking paths, just in light of those beautiful parks that we have? There's a lot of people taking advantage of those in the spring, summer, and the winter. Like, they've been kept like really nice. So that would be my only concern, just, with the sumps being drained in the backyard and safety issues on that walk path, because I've bid it a few times.
Yeah, for sure. And that one seems to be one of the ones that seem to be worse, mainly because of the way the slope works. We have worked with a couple of the owners around, specifically Rosewood Court, I think is where you see a lot of them that kind of come out there. We've worked with a couple of the owners at their cost to actually pipe it underneath the path so that you don't end up with the water running over the path. And it's worked quite well. We can't obviously force people to do that, but the ones where we do have issues with them draining onto the path because they're too close to the rear fence, we do have a provision in the current bylaw where we can require it to be set back 3 meters from the rear yard fence. So now that doesn't always solve the problems, because if you get a lot of rain or whatever, it still can make its way that far, but it does seem to help with kind of the day-to-day. So we can definitely have bylaw take a look out in that area too, just to make sure that any that are draining to the back are still that 3 meter setback from the fence.
Councillor Peterson was next, then Councillor Beck.
This is related to an item that I encountered while campaigning in the fall, and that I had 3 different people express some concern on Martin's Crescent about one of their neighbors who is draining their sump pump onto the front sidewalk. And I happen to notice that if it freezes on the sidewalk, it makes a nasty mess, makes the sidewalk impassable. And I had suggested all 3 of them to phone City Hall to register a complaint. And they said they all had mentioned they had, and nothing had ever been done. So I'm just wondering if that's, if you're aware of this particular location, and if that's something that maybe we should look at.
Yeah, there is a couple definitely in that Martins area. We've heard of 2 that I'm familiar with. Chris may have heard of, Chris Hillash in our office may have heard of another one. That is the main reason why we want the provision in there about moving it back kind of as of October, just so that we don't end up with the ice on the front sidewalks. It's my understanding that anyone's has phoned with concerns about them draining to the front, we had dealt with through bylaw, and I wasn't aware of any that were outstanding. But I don't want to necessarily say that, we didn't miss something there 100%. And I can definitely chat with Chris and Wade just to make sure that if there is any outstanding ones that we've kind of dealt with them. I know there's a really bad one that backs Newfeld Street, where he's got it draining out his back. But because of the amount of water, it makes its way to that sidewalk that's kind of on the south end of Newfeld Street. And we've had some issues there. The other one that I'm familiar with is actually a house. It's on the corner of Rigmore, but they kind of drain out the side of their yard, and it ends up kind of hitting the sidewalk there as well. And we've dealt with that one. Besides those 2, I'm not aware of any others in Southlands, but like I said, I can chat with Chris Hillash in our office and just make sure if we've gotten any of those covered off.
Yeah, this one was right on Martin's, and like after I talked to these 3 neighbors, I went by and there was, at that point, there was some the obvious, I could see obviously where it was, and they had expressed frustration that it had never been dealt with.
Okay, I will. I'll definitely be in touch with Wade after this meeting, and I'll send him out there to take a look. If it's that bad, we should be able to tell which one it is just from the ice on the sidewalk.
And Councillor Beck.
Yeah, thank you. So I like consistency. I'm pretty sure that you are all aware of that. But so I guess I have a question on this. With this year, we're talking about a resident that might have a need for, let's say discharging their sump pump across, let's say like the front of their property. Why would we consider allowing that for some properties and maybe not for others? Why the temporary permit? And also this year, how do you recognize that permit? Because there again, when issues might come up, just, let's say noted there by Councillor Peterson, with this year, one neighbor is going to look down the street and they're going to see a property that is discharging, let's say off of the front and whatnot. So then they're going to want to do the same, due to their issue, but maybe not have a permit. With this year, why would we do that? Why wouldn't we just say during, because you're recommending like your warmer months or the months that don't freeze, with this year, for that to be allowed? Should that not be the general policy rather than a permit being required? And why would we want to create all of that administrative work and confusion to the public?
I guess the main reason is in most situations that we allow this, it's either because we want to do alley maintenance or because there's significant landscaping going on in their rear yard. We don't allow this just because somebody would rather pump out their front than their back. And I guess the reason for there being some follow-up from the city is so that we don't end up with issues where they leave them to the front further than October and we end up with ice on the sidewalks. My concern is that people, if we just allow a carte blanche, anyone can have it out the front from April to October, is a big chunk of those people might not bring them back to the back come fall. So I would much rather see there needing to be a reason why you're putting it to the front, first of all, and second of all, that there's some follow-up to make sure that we're not ending up with a situation where it's out the front after October and you're ending up with ice built up on the street and sidewalks.
Okay. So how might we be able to identify properties that have a permit versus those that don't?
Well, I mean, if we're issuing permits, we're obviously going to be keeping records of that. So our plan was basically that at that October end date, you're going through and determining where any of those ones that have applied for the permits to make sure that those have been put back. And then obviously if there's any additional ones that are either noticed through bylaws, normal kind of roundabouts through the city, or other complaints from residents or whatever, that we would then obviously deal with those separately. I think it's mainly for us just a check and balance so that we don't end up in a situation like maybe what Councillor Peterson's bringing up with Martin's, where someone's put it to the front, we're not aware of it, or we gave permission and it hasn't been kind of followed up on, so it still remains out there.
And like I suppose for me, like I'm looking at it from a from a resident point of view, not whatever, in terms of not let's say not creating confusion for them, and that kind of thing. And there again, what and why it would be allowed versus why it wouldn't. So you're gonna have to bring back a little bit more, clarity for my support on this. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else?
No, I guess we can bring that back to council for further discussion. I guess the only thing I would add to Councillor Beck's concern there is, again, when we would be asking people to do it would be, say, if Public Works is going to do maintenance in an alley, they come to us and say, look, this alley is absolutely too wet. We cannot work in there. There's some pumps running. What we would do is send out letters to kind of everyone on that block, asking them to move it to the front for a temporary basis while we do the maintenance in the alleys. They dry out. In lots of cases, we've been using the crushed asphalt now, so it does work a lot better to pack down and deal with the water issues. And then come back and move them back to the back. In cases where someone came in and specifically asked us to move it to the front, we would only do that in the case of, they're looking to landscape their backyard and can't dry it out enough to basically do it. But I can try and bring back some further information within the report that'll come to council that hopefully will deal with any of those outstanding concerns.
Thank you.
Then just the last item, I guess, is bylaw enforcement. Due to the temperatures, again, we have seen a bit of a decrease in some of the animal control stuff. In addition, just with parking, we have been a little more lax with the enforcement side of things. It's been more of an education for the last few weeks. We understand there's lots of residents that have vehicles parked that either can't start due to the cold or having issues moving from, and they're working from home. So we've just taken a bit of a lean approach to dealing with some of those and giving a bit of the benefit of the doubt where appropriate. I think that concludes everything unless there's any questions for me.
Councillor Seed.
Really quick one here, Manager Todd. You had mentioned in your report, and I apologize that maybe I missed something here, but with regards to the desludging, that you were going to be bringing in Chris Cunningham in a future meeting. I just have, maybe I missed something, but I have no idea who that is.
Sorry, yeah, Chris Cunningham's the kind of project manager for AECom that was hired through the tendering process for the Lagoon project.
Okay.
And we've done it in the past with the old council, just in terms of bringing him in just as a kind of question and answer. Obviously, he's a lot more technical than my knowledge base goes to, so it's helpful for council sometimes.
No, I appreciate it. I was just looking for some context as to who he was, so thank you.
Sorry about that, yeah.
Oh, that's all good, thank you.
It's like all the abbreviation. Sometimes we just assume everybody knows. We'll move to Councillor Ramage. You are part of planning here, going to talk about a report you put together and some of the discussion questions.
Sure. Thanks very much, Mayor Filipchuk. So in front of you on the agenda is more of a summary review of when I was looking through the transportation master plan. Really what I was doing in there was in looking for some information on the Augusta Boulevard extension and what some of the traffic volumes may be in the Traditions neighborhood. Going through that on the traffic volumes, the Traditions neighborhood looks, or based on the report, would have the highest amount of trips in and out of the neighborhood. The next closest one would be Southlands. But what really caught my attention was looking at that intersection of Clubhouse and First and the turning movements that are identified in the future development scenario. When I looked at that, and as the summary would indicate in one of the figures, there aren't any turning movements indicated coming particularly southbound on First Avenue to turn left onto Clubhouse. Recognizing if this is one of the turning movements that is causing some of the issues and the congestion at this intersection, what I wondered is if the turning movements were included in this analysis, how might that change some of the recommendation? I think we're hearing from the community more so. We've received a number of letters over the last week about residents concerned about this intersection and some questions about whether traffic signals are appropriate in this location. So the purpose of bringing this through, and I don't want to go through every line in here, and I can leave that if there's any questions, but looking to discuss having an intersection safety study with recommendations for traffic management controls at this intersection. I think right now we're dealing with congestion issues because there's only one way in and one way out to get to the school. But looking at the longer term horizon, I wonder how we may replace congestion issues with speeding issues. And I'd like some direction from a qualified transportation engineer to look at that, both from a technical level of service, but also from a community level of service and a safety considerations for people that are crossing the street. There's a large parks dedication in the Traditions neighborhood due to the location of the school. That would be create a number of reasons why people might choose to walk or ride their bike across Clubhouse to access this area. And I think with everything, it's time to take a look at this intersection specifically, whereas the transportation master plan update that's on the books would continue to look at all the intersections at a high level. And I think this intersection of Clubhouse and First has some specific issues that we're not necessarily seeing in other intersections that warrants looking at it and coming up with some recommendations. So I'll turn it over for discussion and any questions.
Okay, comments, questions? Councillor Johnson.
So one of my biggest things was I just wanted to know, I know the middle school also, just as being a substitute teacher to get in there, there's a lot of traffic that is, drop off. So I know that we have in-school busing, and that's where I know that this year with COVID, it's been recommended that parents drive their kids. So a lot of the congestion, and I get that, I got 4 kids of my own. But I'm just wondering, how come the buses aren't being utilized? Are they being utilized? Where's all this traffic coming from? And then the traffic study, yes, I've been stuck in that like crazy. So my worry would be that, do we extend that lane? Is there going to be a left-hand turn signal? Is there going to be 2 lanes just for the straightaway? Because there's people going to the Legends, there's people going to the middle school, there's, all that kind of traffic. So that's just my concern, but I know that it's congested. I've been stuck in it, and it's horrific, and I feel their pain, but I wonder too, with the in-town busing that is available, that, maybe that would be less of an issue. I don't know. It's just to kind of get clarification and to find out more, just so we can provide a solution that would work. And I think that traffic study, what are some potential situations that we can possibly look at to alleviate it?
Okay, thank you. Councillor Seed.
So as there's a variety of different issues, I think, at hand here. First and foremost, I'm not interested in putting a quote unquote Band-Aid solution here. I think that from my experience, having 2 kids that attend the school there and being there countless times for different events that are both large and small, that intersection certainly is highlighted during cold snaps because there are no buses, and you got 600 kids that need 450 cars or whatever it is to come pick them up. So I certainly understand why we've been receiving more letters than usual, but this is something that's been identified even outside of the cold weather. To me, speaking with residents and people that have kids that go there, again, I do think that looking at a traffic plan would be beneficial. I think that looking at the traffic plan that we currently have in the limited capacity, and certainly not with the experience of Councilor Ramage, there's huge holes in it. Basically, they designed Clubhouse to go left or east to west, first to go north to south, and if cars meet in between there, they'll just deal with it. It's not something that's safe. It's I don't care whether it's at night and there's cars coming out or it's during school hours. It's a huge concern for me. I don't think it's a matter of if. I think it's a matter of when. There could potentially be something there, and that bothers me a lot. I think that the school going to that location clearly upset kind of the flow of the plan, because I know that there was development plan from east to west, so to speak. But I don't think that looking at a set of traffic lights there that could be on a limited, at certain times of the day, they're programmed to act in certain traffic patterns. I don't think that would be a negative thing, because I do believe that as that neighborhood starts to get developed more and more, that it will become inevitable anyways. So I think that it's not really a knee-jerk reaction. It needs to be carefully thought out, but I do think that it's something that the concept of it I definitely support, but would want to see people that are more integrated with traffic telling us why it will or why it will not work.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? Councillor Beck.
Yeah, thank you. Certainly, with this particular intersection, like one of the complexities behind it is, certainly like the time of year that a study is done. Certainly during the school year, the traffic demands there for pedestrian traffic is going to be, let's say quite a bit different, even in terms of vehicle traffic for parents. Let's say from a school year to through to your summertime. And as previously highlighted, obviously when the buses are not running, it elevates it to that extreme that clearly this single intersection servicing that particular land use is basically over demand. So with this, I actually would like to see a study done. I would actually like to see some numbers behind it too before I commit to anything, obviously. And I guess, I would, throw out there the recommendation that because our, I believe it was Associated Engineering had done the original transportation master plan, that they have a fairly good understanding of the traffic flow and maybe some of the changes that have happened since they've actually provided that transportation master plan to us. With this, I'd like to see reach out to them to see exactly how much a study for this would actually happen, or let's say what that would actually cost, and also to make sure that that is done during the school year, so that we have a good understanding. Let's say to this particular intersection, and let's say how much pedestrians and also vehicle traffic and the time of day, especially for the school time hours. So I think that would be important. Clearly, from the emails that have been coming in and from the conversations that we've been having, there is a safety concern. Now, whether or not that has been, truly identified or whatnot, bottom line, that is how our residents are feeling about this particular intersection. That safety, compromise is there. So I think we need to, look at this in seriousness and see what would be recommended, for us to kind of deal with this. And then with this year, after we have that, we can certainly make some decisions, put some timelines in place, and certainly do our best to deal with the situation. So, I guess from a council support perspective, that is what I would like to see. Thank you.
Other comments? Councillor Tooley.
So I got to say, overall, I'm supportive of reviewing it, but I do want to be really cautious with this, because I do recognize that, this particular year and the last, basically the last year in total, I guess sort of since the school year started this year, one thing that we got to keep in mind is that the traffic flows that are going to and from the schools right now are artificial in some respects. We're asking people to, one, not carpool, and those kind of things. So we're actually sending people there, within their households. And that's really all that people are going to drop off and pick up with their kids. So, I mean, we're in a really artificial kind of situation right now. And I think we also have to look at the neighborhood and the dynamics of that particular neighborhood, is that it's not completely built out yet. And I don't know if this issue is going to be, is this going to be the worst intersection going in and out of that neighborhood in the future, or is it going to be mitigated a lot in the future by some of the future development and other intersections that are going to be going in and coming out of this particular neighborhood? I know right now the problem is really highlighted, and I think we all kind of want to be a little bit, attentive to that. But I do want to be cautious that we're not, moving in a direction that's too fast, too soon, and that we're going to be throwing, a lot of resources at a solution that really is just a temporary band-aid right now. And, so I want to look at it from that kind of perspective and that particular outlook. And, whoever we get to come in and sort of review the flows of traffic in and out, I really want to make sure they have a very good understanding of what stage that neighborhood's at right now and what's going to be left for future intersections going in and out. Because when it comes down to it, when you look around at lots of other places where schools are, you've got busy neighborhoods. And quite frankly, I don't see a lot of traffic lights in some of those neighborhoods. You go through a neighborhood like Rosewood or the Evergreens, those kind of things in Saskatoon. You've got some very busy schools, very large schools. Again, same issues, lots of people dropping their kids off right now. But there's a lot of other roadways going in and out of those neighborhoods right now, which is maybe mitigating or highlighting what this issue is in this particular neighborhood. And so, just again, I just want to be very, very cautious that, personally, I know I'm not an engineer, and this isn't my wheelhouse to even look at and think about. And that's the lens I'm going to be looking at it with.
Thank you, Councillor Tooley. Councillor Peterson.
Yeah, I think I want to echo a lot of what Councillor Tooley has said, and that, we've got to be cautious. We have that, the traffic, study, and we should really, rely on those warrants and rely on the expertise of the engineers to tell us, the direction we should be going. And that I think, if we spend $200,000 or $300,000 on a set of lights that is never actually warranted, once the neighborhood is built out, that's wasteful. And the last thing I want to do is be wasteful with city money. That just leads to increases taxes for no reason. So I think we really need to be careful how we approach this and make sure that we look at all the avenues and what are best practices.
Councilor Ramage?
Thanks very much, and definitely appreciate the discussion around here. But I think the discussion highlights the importance of having a transportation or traffic engineer look at the study, as Councillor Johnson pointed out. How does this function? Where does this go? How is the timing done? I think those are things that we don't have the answers for, so we can get the guidance for. And certainly cognizant of not spending money unnecessarily. But I think there's the technical aspect of it, and there's the community aspect of it, and that's something that I'd like considered in this report, is going, how does the flow of people walking, riding their bikes, that interaction of the school, even during the summer months, how does that play overall into our park system, which is something that we do invest quite heavily in. And I think it's having those conversations. So that's the importance that I see this. So definitely appreciate the discussion.
And I'll just put in a couple comments too. A lot of the complaints I actually got were more about the pickup area and really about the last couple of weeks being 40 below, which meant no, or 30 below, 40 with the wind chill is the threshold that the school uses when no buses are running. And everybody wants to have their child walk as close as possible to the vehicle, but that, if you multiply out the numbers, so some of the complaints were coming specifically people picking up in front of the schools, and then actually only had one that was really tied to the intersection for me. And I realized Councillor C got a few other ones, and the city got a few other ones specifically to that intersection. So I'm always good with more information, but I always question a little bit how much the cost will be. I want to be aware of those costs along the way. And as sort of some have mentioned along the way, is what are we basing our decisions on when we're dealing with traffic? And really the problem in front of the school will not be dealt with until that area is completely built out where they can drive straight through instead of doing a U-ball in front. And so that's many years down the road before that actually will get done. But I think what I'm hearing is that we want to have management seek out more information to find out how much a report would cost to us, and then what that report would entail, and then we give the yes or no to go with the report or not. That's what I'm hearing so far. Councillor Ramage.
Yeah, I would agree. That's the intent moving forward here. But there's just one last consideration that I wanted to put forward. Right now, I think it's the situation at hand. There's a lot of congestion. And yes, as that neighborhood develops, there's more access points. But that's where I wonder, we have a 1.3 kilometer length section of Clubhouse between Thompson Road and Centennial on a fairly wide street. Could we be dealing with speeding issues along Clubhouse after the congestion is solved? And then how does that play into any recommendations? So that's where I think that build out of the neighborhood consideration is important, and what the conditions we would be dealing with should be considered.
Okay, thank you. And I think those are things that if we, once management puts together a reach out, and I do like Councillor Beck's recommendation that let's go back to the people that have already spent a lot of hours on this. They have a base to at least see what it would be, what the cost would be, and we'll let management sort of guide us along those ways. So management, do you have everything you need at this point? Councillor or Manager Smith?
Yeah, I think so. We're just looking for what we need as a scope, and I think that you want an overall view of the whole area, including what developments are going to be in the future, as well as just this location. And also, if there is some warrants put in or some traffic lighting required, how is that's going to impact speeding, et cetera, et cetera. So it's definitely a large undertaking than just the intersection itself and doing some traffic counts. But that's what we'll be putting forward.
Okay, good. And really, it's all the impacts of putting in traffic lights. What would be the impacts all the way through, and just expand it out at that point. So, I think once we see that, then we'll see what they come back as far as the cost moving forward. I think we're good with that. Okay, so that's the direction we gave administration. We will move on to. Do we have a break, or is it recreation? Recreation.
Good afternoon, Mayor Philipchuk, members of council. You have my report in front of you. There's no real action items within the report. There are a couple areas that I would like to touch upon as we move forward. In the Legend Center, the arena expansion. I think this has gone out to all councilors, and I just thought I'd include the letter in my report. We were unsuccessful in our application for funding. This was a little bit of a long reach out there with the COVID aspect of it, but we decided to put all of our eggs in one basket and go for it. This isn't the last funding stream coming from this program. I believe there are 2 more yet to come. So we'll keep an eye on that. Also with that, what I'm going to do just for the new councilors on the city council, I'm going to put a needs assessment report together. I've spoken to City Manager Smith, and we feel it's a good idea just to bring it on and say, this is why we are wanting to do this project. This is some of the needs and wants of the community. And then everybody's on the same page as we move forward with the new members on council. So we'll put that together, and hopefully you can have that by the next committee of the whole. A couple things to talk about. Diamond Arena and Legends Arena. We're coming to the end of the season here within the next month of minor hockey, ringette, and the skating club. Currently right now, we're talking about looking at probably a March 21st finish for all 3 groups. Kind of just, they're all gonna pack it in very close to the same time. So they're not sure exactly what that extra ice is. So at the Diamond Arena, usually we close the arena once provincials wrap up, and once the skate club has their carnival, we usually shut the arena down somewhere in around the March 20th, March 21st. And then the Legends Center, we continue on, and we usually run the ice until the last week of April, so that we can do a quick transition over to ball hockey and to lacrosse. This year, right now, it's not looking like there's going to be any need for April ice. And if that need does arise, we're entertaining shutting the Legend Center down just because of costs to operate, and potentially running the Diamond Arena for an extra 3 weeks if it's required. So just so in case somebody comes knocking on your door, and it's simple mathematics, it's $7,000 a month to provide power at the Diamond Arena, and it's $30,000 a month at the Legend Center. So it's basically economics that's going to drive that. And if we can get away with some nice weather and get into April and keep that ice over there, then that's always our biggest fear with the smaller ice plant. But we think it can handle it. We had a really nice September this year, so April won't be any better than that. So further to that, we did have a little bit of vandalism at the Legend Center last week. We have 2 young suspects that we've identified with the help of some minor hockey persons and with the school a little bit. Our RCMP are working with those families right now to come to an agreement and get us all in one room and talk about what happened and what's needed to be done to put some respect back into those kids being in our facilities. So we'll continue to work with the RCMP to make that happen. The last thing I wanted to touch base on was the recreation software. This is kind of out of right field for us. We have Max Galaxy right now, and it runs all of our facilities from the campgrounds right through to ball diamonds, rinks, all of that. That right now runs on the platform, the Internet Explorer platform, and that's sunsetting. We were guaranteed by Max Galaxy that they would be able to reformat and we'd be on a different platform. That apparently isn't going to be the case. So we are right now, I think there's 7 or 8 of us within the province that use the same cities within the province that use the same software. So we are going to work together. I know Coralie and her staff have had some sit downs and where they've got to look at some of the options out there. And I think she has one more to go. And then we'll be making a decision there. So right now, as of April, end of April, I think is what we'll get to keep Max Galaxy with. After that, we'll be looking for something completely different. So we're time sensitive here. What we're gonna run into a little bit is some of those membership fees and subscriptions. Some are more, some are less. We're anticipating almost an equal transfer over. Usually these types of companies like a little higher to switch over to them, and then as we go through the contract, it lessens. But we're working with them, and a lot of them understand where we're coming from and moving over. So they're willing to work with us a little bit. So we'll try to eliminate that as much as we possibly can moving forward. Okay. And that's all I wanted to really touch on.
Any questions or comments? Councillor Seed.
Hopefully a quick one, Paul. In your report there, you list ActiveNet as being the one that you're interested in, and that it's a sister of Max Galaxy. Say, is that owned wholly or partially by the same company as Max Galaxy?
Yes, it is. And unfortunately, that we've had a trial with them, and we're leaning. Actually, we as a department are leaning towards Perfect Mind. So ActiveNet is the only one we haven't had a trial with. So we've had trials with Perfect Mind and Booking, and right now Perfect Mind seems to be the one that suits our needs a little bit better.
Okay, yeah, my question was along the lines of, would there be any kind of consideration of finances if we were switching over within the same umbrella of a company? But obviously, if we're leaning towards another one, then that's off the table. So thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments? Well, I'm glad there's still funding streams available. I know that we will do what we can, reaching out to the people we know to try and get on that pathway to having some funding towards our arena, because it really is some of that balance all the way through that I hopefully, it's a major capital project, but it's something that I think in fairness, when I'm seeing things being built around the province, it really is our turn for that type of area.
I agree with you. Yeah. And it's not like we're asking for $44 million. We're asking for $6 million, right? And so hopefully those that are adjudicating take that into consideration in the next stream.
Sure tried to let him know this time, but I was disappointed in that. Councillor Tooley.
Sorry, it just took me a second to unmute. I do, when we were at the Municipalities of Saskatchewan conference, I sat in on the Minister of Municipal Affairs or Minister of Government Relations, and there was quite a few questions that came up about the ISIP program and some of the projects that didn't make the funding round. And just some of the information that was conveyed, just for council to know, is that program actually is scheduled to run until 2028. So there's a few years still left in the program. One thing that they did explain was that this current round of funding was actually related more to the COVID side of things. And so they actually opened it up and there was less restrictions on what the funding could be for. So basically they kind of opened it up to being everything. And I think they kind of, that needs basis probably outweighed the program funding or the program options that would have been part of the normal ISIP program funding. The one thing that they did talk about was more than likely when it comes to the new intakes that they're going to be having, that they will be asking communities to reapply again. However, they did indicate that was probably going to be just mostly a cut and paste type of an exercise. So I know Paul and the department will be very conscientious of when those program announcements or when the intakes are going to be announced. And I am going to be on the, I know they're going to be on the ball for when that comes out. So, but just want to make everybody aware that that's some of the stuff that came out of that particular session.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Recreation? Okay, thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
I forgot to mention at the end of last one, thank you to Councillor Ramish for putting all that information together and pulling it all together from major reports. I realize the amount of time it took to sort of gather all that and put it in a presentable fashion. I know even cutting it down to that many pages is tough sometimes. So thank you for that. And also I wanted to mention about some of the letters that we got about in front of the schools. I know Public Works is working to get the windrows dealt with in a timely fashion. That's one of the issues, and then also the sidewalk. So that'll be really what some of the complaint was, that some of those that sidewalk is cleared in front of the Catholic school as it is in front of the public school. And I'm not sure, it may have just been how the cars were parked at that time, but I want to point that out. We are at break, and I think we should take one. We've been at this more than 2 hours. I've got on my cell phone 3:15. We will gather back at 3:25, okay, on cell phone. So 10 minutes.
Mayor Philip Chuck,
Yeah.
can I ask a question about the funding for the second arena? Does the government actually provide reasons for refusal or why we were declined at all, or?
Not always, no. It's generally during the conversation with the minister, it was about us getting funding for the lagoon. So that would be one of the things that would be one of the weights he said that would come into play. That would be the challenge, that we got major funding there. They are separate, but some ways they look at balance. That's always been a complaint of mine is with funding in general, is that with all funding, there's winners and losers, instead of how do you find ways that money's accessible to those that want to put more money into it themselves. So
yeah. And does it play into, so is there other, like you said, with the aeration and that kind of stuff, that would have been a big pull. But do you think maybe, is it because we're only asking for 6 million because we've done a good job with funding it ourselves, and that, well, they've got 2 ice services, like, I don't know, like, do they give you anything as far as that?
No, they don't. No, they don't. And I mean, it's, I think they want to, again, they have the power. They actually recommended to the federal government with that moving forward. So, okay, let's see. I've got 1 more minute yet. I'll wait till exactly 3:25 on my.
One real quick thing here, just so people can know, I don't know if anybody saw or not, but all the COVID restrictions have been maintained until March now.
I saw an announcement, but I didn't read it yet. So thank you for that update.
March 19th, no changes until then.
No change. Oh, okay. And wow. Working out with the mask still.
Okay, we will call our meeting back to order, and we will go to Fire Chief Austin.
Okay, can everybody hear me okay? Perfect. Well, thank you, Mayor Philipchuk, members of council. You have my report in front of you. It was a little bit of a lengthier report today. Basically, just outlined that January was pretty busy for us with 40 calls. It has been fairly quiet since, and then of course, after I sent you my Friday file, I think we had 15 calls in 4 days here over the weekend. So things just happen. That's the way it is. But nothing too unusual as far as statistics regarded. Does anybody have any statistics questions before I move on? Okay, so hearing none, I'll just keep on rolling. I promised you an update for the ambulance trial project, which I kind of did on there. If I guess if you would call it an update, we haven't seen an ambulance, nor has the city of Martensville. It's my understanding that they don't have any spare ambulances, or very rare spare ambulances, in the city of Saskatoon. So they need 2 free there, and they don't have that. And the plan revolved around having a 3rd free ambulance to come out to Warman and Martensville and base out of our fire halls. So, sad to report that we've had nothing happen on that front. And also going through, and in my report, of course, the day after I write my report, we have a couple instances where we have ambulance waits that are longer than 30 or 40 minutes, which we haven't been seeing in quite some time. But I think they are doing a better job about staffing that north end base and being a little quicker to respond. But it's my understanding that the city is starting to be overrun with calls, and again, with staff burnout and not having staff to put in the spare ambulances, I think is part of that key. I did look at response times, because I did promise Mayor and Council that we would look somewhere in there. I didn't go over a whole bunch of fire, just went over on the medical side. And our response times, we like to be right around that 7.5, 8 minutes if we can. With our volunteers, that's a pretty traditional number for us to be at. It was stretched to about 9.5 minutes, depending on it wasn't a complete audit of our entire year. It was just a snapshot every 2 months as we went forward. But when you think about our protocols now, where when we come to the fire hall, before we would just come, they would get assigned to a truck, jump in the vehicle, and off they would go. Now, when we get there, they're going over and putting on isolation gowns and face shields and goggles and doing all of those things before they ever get into our truck. So it does add a little bit of time, but if all the safety protocols cost us is a little bit of time, I think we're doing pretty well. The truth of the matter that holds through that the city of Warman is considered rural. As it is on the books right now, the acceptable ambulance response time for a resident in the city of Warman when they call 911 for an ambulance is 30 minutes, 90% of the time. That is their benchmark. That same person, if they're calling in the city of Saskatoon, can expect an ambulance within 9 minutes, 90% of the time, for dialing the same 911 number. So I believe with Warman being the fastest growing municipality in Canada and being a city in ourselves, and if you think of our outlying area around here of about 20,000 people and nearly right around that 13,000 mark with eHealth in the city of Warman, I think our residents have a higher expectation of what we're seeing. And luckily, we do have, well, Warman invented the concept of the first responder. So I'm not sure if all our new city councilors knew that, but the very first responder group in Saskatchewan was Warman. So we were group 001. We worked with Dr. Cross and Tim Hillier with Medivy. Then MD Ambulance put this program together, and we've been doing it ever since. So, and now first responder is kind of a staple of Saskatchewan rural EMS. There's first responders everywhere. It might be, 2 people working out of their house, or in our case, 30 people that do 383 calls a year. It has different faces, but it's one of those things where when somebody dials 911, they're more concerned if how quick anybody is going to get there to help them out, and our volunteer first responders do a heck of a job as far as taking care of our needs. And quite honestly, I don't think that many of our residents know that we are first responders and not ambulance, even though we are the face of EMS in our communities. So I know there's some opportunities there, and I know your worship and members of council, I've talked to a few of you. I know this is high on your radar as well. And I think this is going to be a year of focus on this issue, I think. Is there any questions with that part of my report?
Okay, Councillor Peterson.
So just correct me if I read this wrong, but it looked to me in your report like they are not dispatching you guys right away to make their numbers look better. Did I read that wrong?
That was a concern a few years ago. We used to get a report because everything is computer dispatched from when now used to be Medivy, but now it's Medical Control Central. They keep track of all those times, and there was an issue a few years ago. Martinsville and Warman both saw it, where there was their primary focus was to get that EMS unit running, and then the first responders were kind of an afterthought. So there would be a disconnect. Their goal, again, benchmark goal, was to get their first responders rolling within 1 minute of the ambulance call. Right now, I can't tell you if that still continues, because as soon as we raise concerns, we no longer got that report. We were told it was a HIPAA violation, and we weren't authorized to look at it. So I don't have that data for you. I'm sorry.
Okay, so if that's the case, that to me signals that they're trying to hide something. And I think that is something that we need to raise on a political level, because that's not okay. That's there's in no world, in any way, shape, or form, is that okay.
Yeah, and I don't want to. I definitely don't want to throw stones, but I have no way of confirming or denying that, Councillor Peterson. It's one of those things that we just hope that we are all on the same page and have the patient's best interest at heart. So,
Councillor Johnson.
So I pardon my ignorance, but how do they define what is rural and what is urban, and how do we go about getting that designation so that we can be part of the solution?
Really good question, Councillor Johnson. I believe that at your level as our elected officials, someone would have to get access to what the agreements are with the private providers and see what that contract looks like, because I don't know any of the parameters in there. It was my understanding when the ambulance was act was originally set out that there was only 6 centers that were considered cities, because back in the late 60s, early 70s, there probably was only 6 cities. So if you fit into one of those cities, by definition, you were a city. And Warman at that time might have been, 2,200 people. So we weren't in that ballpark. However, I don't think that act has been remarkably changed since the 70s. There is a 1992 revision, I think, is the one that's on the website right now, but that's I don't have any way of making that change. And I believe it like I said, it's at that elected officials level, because from what I understand, our minister that's in charge of pre-hospital EMS in this area is the minister for remote and rural health. So that would tell us that systemically within Saskatchewan health, somewhere there is where we're defined as being rural. If there's a minister assigned to us as that's what that tells me. So I honestly don't know where you can find that information.
Oh, I was just going to ask. So if I were to look, like, who would I contact on your behalf to find out how we change that designation? And let's kind of create some action here. So if it's something that I can do, how do I go about it? Or okay, thank you.
And I know there's been a couple of councillors that have asked me some specific questions around that piece. I think the beginning of the conversation would be His Worship reaching out to our MLA, who's our provincial representative, and maybe going from there, or if that's delegated to somebody from council, whoever would want to take that on. But it's far above the waters that the fire chief swims in. So.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Seed.
Thank you, Mayor Philipchuk. Okay, so I just for the rest of council to be aware of as well, after the last council meeting, this is something that I've probably spent probably 40 or 50 hours on in the last week and a half, looking up and probably being a pain in Russ's butt, asking him questions. A couple of things that have come out of this, though, that I haven't had a chance to ask, that I'd like to get some clarity on, and it would require Chief Austin and I'm assuming Bob to take a look at. Currently in Saskatchewan, we have the Ambulance Regulations Act that notify that there is a section in that act, which is part 5 of it, that specifically mentions that applications for renewal of ambulances and for services provided. To me, that indicates that it's a tendered process. And correct me if I'm wrong, but anything over, I believe it's $5,000 or $10,000 has to be tendered. Clearly, an ambulance contract for even a year is worth far more than $10,000. So I would like to have administration take a look at that to find out when that contract, based on my research that was signed in 1980, comes up for renewal again, because to my understanding, it hasn't been tendered by anything that I can find, and I do a lot of tenders through my work, since 1980. So I would definitely like to see that. I think it's a bit of a, it may be unfair to say, but I think it's a bit of an old school gentleman's agreement, and let the sleeping dogs lie, but I think that it's time for us to wake them up. I do have the answer for Councillor Johnson as well, with regards to who is in charge of determining whether it's rural or not. So the Ministry of Health is ultimately responsible for legislation and for regulations pertaining to the EMS and ground services. However, formerly there was regional health authorities that determined who was rural and who was municipal in every jurisdiction. And since now all of the rural health authorities have been amalgamated, it's my understanding, based on what I can find, that in fact is being defaulted back to the Ministry of Health. So I do think that Chief Austin is correct that we would need to potentially involve our MLA at that point. But I would also like to see and again, I apologize, I haven't given Chief Austin a heads up on this, but I would like to reach out to Martinsville as well. And I would like to find out if they echo our concerns for their constituents as well, because I believe that what's happening in Warman is also happening in Martinsville. And then I think that if we could, come together as two communities and express our concerns to our MLA, who thankfully covers both of our areas anyways, and express to him that we have, 26,000 people that are concerned about something, not 13,000. I think that could carry a lot more weight. But I am preparing a report for council as well, just on the information that I found, because it's a little bit troubling, to be honest. And I think that if Warman Fire Rescue, to put it bluntly, didn't do such an awesome job within our community, I think that we would be, it would be a much larger issue than it is. But we can't let the professionalism of Warman Fire Rescue determine or let the health authority not provide the services that as taxpayers we are absolutely paying for and they're required to provide. So it gets me a little riled up, but it's something that I'm deeply passionate about it. I think that it's time for a change on it. There's no question about it, in my opinion. And I would hope that based on the information, and certainly if there's any questions that I can help with, I've read a lot on it. I probably have about 900 pages printed off. And so if there's something there, it's a simple question, people can shoot me a text or anything as well. Thank you.
And Councillor Seed, I don't know, my only comment to that is I've tried in the past just to ask. I think you're right as far as the tendering process goes. I've asked where I can find the agreements. There's financial components to the agreements, like how much, does an ambulance service get subsidized? Because I'm sure they don't put the entire cost of an ambulance trip from, say, Warman to Saskatoon on the taxpayer. I'm sure that there's some form of provincial tax money that goes towards that. But many years I've tried quite a few times, and maybe City Manager Smith can shed some light on this one. But I've been told that they are historical agreements, and I don't have enough weight to get where that agreement is. There has to be an agreement. I think you are 1,000% correct. There has to be one. I just don't know where it is. It might be an access to information request that has to come from the city.
The other, sorry.
Go ahead.
Sorry. The other concern that I have is that I've been unsuccessful in trying to, and granted, I'm not making phone calls on the city's behalf. That's not my, it's not the chain of command that we need to follow. But even doing research online and trying to find out the agreement between Medavie and the Saskatoon Health Region for this ambulance service between Martinsville and Warman. From the little bit of information I can find, it looks like it's a substantial amount of money. Like we're talking towards $1 million that's being allocated for this kind of funding. And as of yet, they're receiving the funding, to my knowledge. But as Chief Austin has indicated, we haven't seen an ambulance that's been part of that program. So, $1 million could fund an ambulance in Martinsville and Warman for a very, very long time. So it's just something as council, I would encourage us all to take a very hard look at it, because it's deeply concerning to me that it's kind of reeks of an old boys club, and I think it's time for it to be broken up.
City Manager Smith, you want to add something to this?
No, just the chief had asked if I had anything further to. I appreciate and agree with all the comments that have been around the table, and certainly you probably heard that at Municipalities of Saskatchewan Convention as well regarding ambulance service. It is bigger than the legislation. It's bigger than the cost. Like that $1 million, I think, was for the whole Saskatoon region for a pilot project, which they did. It didn't pan out according to Chief Austin, but they tried something, and that was based on a conversation that we had with the ministry and Medavie and all the players, Chief Austin, myself, Her Worship. We're all in the room having that discussion. I'd say a year ago.
Almost exactly.
And so it's still ongoing. That discussion is still ongoing, and there's a lot of moving parts behind it when you talk about a rural. Whether you're rural or not rural, whether do you have a hospital? Most of those communities that are classified as city now have a hospital in their community, and it's not just a population. It's not just, you know, it's your outlying community. There's a whole bunch of things that go into it. And I know our intent was to have this pilot project because that's what we were promised, and we're not reaping the benefits that we feel we need from it. And I think having that ongoing discussion regarding what's next and how can we resolve this would probably be the next step. And again, that'd just be resurrecting, I would think, those meetings that we had before. And I think Chief Austin was having that discussion with the other fire chiefs in the area, as well as SHA and so on, to see if we can get those meetings resurrected, because the pilot project, in our view, didn't pan out all that well. I'll leave it at that. Sorry.
Thank you. And I think it's important that we were sent out information about the past, what has been done from the city vantage point, some of the agreement that was that we have come up with, but the follow through didn't happen. We know that. And I mean, that's something that we will hold back out. The challenge we've had was we've had an election in between, we've had a change of ministers, so all those things make it move down a little bit each time. Every time those things happen, and I'm talking provincial election, and then dealing with different health ministers, because the people that were in the room are no longer there. So I mean, all the way through from our own MLA, I have no problem with anybody reaching out to our MLA and at least discussing this to get that on his radar, because I think those types of conversations, even some of the terminology that people have used, that's probably a more appropriate place for that, is just to say, here's what I understand. It's his job to find out that that's different. He will be a part of those meetings, but he won't be the decision maker in those meetings. He's going to be one of those people that's also there to advocate. But at the end of the day, it's the health minister and the rural health, and we need to find out where we fit in between those. But I wanted to make sure that we had everything in a row here, that we were able to, this is our ask. This is what we were promised in the past. This is what we got, or perceived what we've got along the way. What are we going to do to solve this issue? And so I think the money's going to come from them along the way, because I agree, the whole ambulance area is a very confusing area that you can't just sort of look at it from your own bubble. You have to look at it all the way through, and healthcare in general comes across that way too. So I will go to Councillor Tooley first.
I guess just when it comes to this particular file, one of the questions that really jumps into my mind is that, you know, we're working under the context right now of a pilot project, and we've been doing that for, I think, a few months now. And I think, at what point do we really just sort of question the ministry and say, you know, you've committed to this pilot project, and at what point are you guys going to say that you actually have failed and that you haven't, you know, lived through with or lived up to any of sort of what was intended with that particular project, and then how do we move on to the next one?
Thank you. Councillor Seed.
Yeah, I think to one point that I neglected to make, and I think that for those of you that read through all of Chief Austin's report, like, we talk about the fact that this year or last year, based on the statistics provided by Chief Austin, August, April, and September were the only months in the entire calendar year that we did not have an exponential increase in calls for medical service within the city of Warman. My concern is that as our population continues to grow, it's going to become unmanageable. We're going to be faced with a situation where if we have one medical call, we're generally okay. If we have two, we're stressed. If we have three, forget it. It's whenever Medivy can show up. And that's if keeping in mind that we have mutual aid agreements with Martinsville, with other surrounding areas. And even in speaking to members there, they've told me flat out, there's a very high probability with medical calls that they cannot attend. So that's again, a really, really big concern. And the fact that there is information being withheld as far as statistical information that would prove our point, or, hey, if they can show us stats that say we're completely wrong, I'm all for it. I want to see it. But I do think that it needs to be pushed. And if, in fact, somebody's going to reach out to Terry Jensen, I would certainly appreciate the opportunity for me to be that person if nobody else has any objections, and if obviously Mayor Filipchuk says that that would be okay. And of course, any reports or any questions, I would be happy to bring forward. So, thank you.
I'm saying all of us can reach out to Terry Jansen, and I think that when we have these types of issues, if you have a passion in these areas, I mean, I think your MLA is a person that you should be able to reach out to and feel comfortable reaching out. The official part's going to come from us, from the mayor. It's going to come when we set up a meeting, and then who's invited to that might be the lead, but will be our management team as part of that too. But I think when we're trying to educate our local person, those conversations can happen more than one time. So I'm fine with that. Councillor Johnson.
So just one more thing, have we talked at all about a hospital here in Warman? Is there, I know there's more to it, but has that been, if that's something that is pushing that city status, you know, has that been broached at all? Is it something that we need to look at?
It has been brought up, and I think we are looking at some aspects. We were really going to be considered for some type of care once they dealt with the emergency care right now in the city. And as we know, right now, as Chief Austin's mentioned many times, the offload is one of the big issues where you have the bottleneck that it wouldn't matter how many we have right now. If we had everybody had ambulances, we would just create a big long line up there until they deal with that problem moving all the way through. So I think they're trying to deal with the problems sequentially along the way, realizing there is a problem. I think they see that there is a problem, but it's helping them with the solution, but it's also, here's our reality. But I go back to what we said before too, is that we made an agreement. We want our part of the agreement because we thought that that was going to be a stepping stone to maybe hosting a service here in our area, whether it's Warman, Martinsville, or both, if both sort of need. So we saw this as an opportunity to start that process. So we did have more of a vision than what we had. Councillor Peterson.
Exactly to the point you just mentioned about the offload times. The Sask Party government has made it clear that when they see that as the issue, and the way that they're going to deal with it is throw money at Metaviv to handle it. That's throwing money in exactly the wrong place, because the offload issue is there because of a chain reaction. There's not enough long-term beds in the province. So then people who need to go to long-term care homes are waiting in the hospital. Because they're waiting in the hospital, they're taking up beds that people who are coming in through emergency need to have. So there's no place to admit them to beds. So putting money into ambulances for the province is not going to solve anything. It's just going to waste more money and string us along. We really need to get it across to the MLAs that where they need to focus their money to bring down these wait times and get ambulances back on the street is to increase long-term care beds. That's where the money's going to be spent wisely to help us in the long run. So when any of us are talking to an MLA, whether it's ours or another one that we might know, when they bring up that wait time for the ambulance drivers, that's what we need to drive home, is don't waste the money throwing it at Metaviv, because that won't solve the issue. It's long-term care beds that will solve the issue.
And I think we need to hear what their action plan is on it, because I think we are gonna, that's why we want to talk to the minister. We'll set up a meeting with the minister. That's why we didn't want to rush 15-minute meeting at the SUMA conference. Was we wanted to have something where we can have our time that we actually need to have this full conversation along the way, because it's not just one issue, and it is the domino effect, like you say. We don't need a Band-Aid solution with this. We need to be innovative, as Chief Austin mentioned, that we were the first, and we want to be maybe the first to sort of help other areas in the province too. Any other final comments? Your arm looks a little sore there, Marshall, or Councillor Seed. Still up or okay?
Just one closing remark on that is that I give or take $1.8 million, I believe, is what was given by the government through SHA to handle the two issues that were on their radar, which was offload delays and the area north of Saskatoon's ambulance service. So the money that was given wasn't for just one or just the other. Just the way that it goes, this was a trial project, and like Councillor Tooley said, probably a failed project. We need to go to Plan B or the next step. However, we had assurances in that meeting that we had that the trial project might be temporary, but the funding model is permanent. So if this doesn't work, there's a Plan B and there's a Plan C and there's a Plan D. It's on their radar to fix it, and I'm sure Mayor and Council and we'll do what we can to give you all the information we need to get stuff moving along. But yeah, they said the funding is permanent. They know there's an issue, so.
Okay. And I'll work with Chief Austin and Manager Smith and Councillor Seed as the lead with that, and we'll put together our ask and then we'll set up that meeting. I want to have this open conversation this way, but then it's also hearing some of the themes. And ambulance it came up as one of the concerns at the conference, but it wasn't, as they have many on their radar right now, COVID being number one. Everything under the COVID umbrella seems to be the one that they're dealing with right now. But we need to get our names forward and have these conversations specific to our needs here. Councillor Seed?
So one last comment as well, just speaking to acquaintances, I guess, that are involved in other smaller communities north of Saskatoon and in close proximity to us that do have ambulance services. Even talking about some of the basic numbers that has been shared that's publicly available as far as responses, they were actually really surprised even talking to them, saying that Warman Fire is doing, in one case, 30 times the calls that they're doing, and they have an ambulance sitting there. So I really think that there is some good merit in us getting these questions put together and asking why. It's not about why does the community have something and we don't. It's just that you can justify it for them. It's easily justified for us. So I mean, obviously I'm biased looking at it, but I think it would be very easy to put together a comprehensive argument on this plan. So thank you.
Thanks for all the comments, everyone. And we will be moving this forward, and we will move the levels of conversation up. And it's sort of a continuation from last year, but we need some more input on their side. Okay. Anything else, Chief Austin?
Just the one, I do have a recommendation there. We did reach out to a bunch of dealers for a heavy duty cab and chassis. For those of you who don't know what a cab and chassis is, imagine a pickup truck with no box. Basically, that's what it is. So it's the cab and two rails going to the back, and we can put on whatever we want, because we'll be putting some boxes and a flat deck and some other utility things back there to make it a fire useful vehicle. We did reach out to a couple Chev, a couple Ford, and a single Dodge dealership for that cab and chassis. And the best price came in at $54,924, but there is one that's a couple hundred dollars more for the F350. We already have 3 Super Duty Ford trucks in our fleet. So when you go to a grass fire and things like that, you burn through air filters and different things. So we keep that stuff in stock. So there is some merit to the efficiencies created by going with the same one. The big one is delivery time. As Jason from Public Works said, there is such a demand for trucks right now that it's really hard. In 32 weeks, 38 weeks, whatever it might be. So you're looking at November, end of November, early December by the time you might see one of these other chassis. Luckily, the bid from Discovery Humboldt and Watrous Mainline, which were competitive, they have slots in the queue for this build year. So they prepaid their slots. And what they do is when a customer like us comes into Discovery Humboldt, we want this F350 cab and chassis. They can get it in the queue and get the build started right away. And if they don't have a customer come forward that wants that spot, then they'll just fill it and build a spec truck, and they'll make their money back. So that 8-week delivery from confirmation is our key. So I do have our committee. We do have a 7-person committee that goes through our vehicles, and that was our unanimous choice for that bid. So that's the recommendation that's before you, Mayor and Council.
Any further questions? Councillor Seed.
Sorry, real quick with regards to this, because I'm unaware of any kind of rules or regulations with it, because of the fact that it's an 8-week lead time to get it, is there any special parameters for council to potentially approve that prior to the next meeting so that we don't wait a week or two to be able to get it? Which obviously adds to the how fast that we could have it in operation? Or is that something that, no, we just wait until the next meeting period and then proceed from there if council approves?
I guess this is where the initial discussion, if there's anything really a pushback, it should come to the surface here too. But you're right, the official passing it is next council meeting. We passed it in the budget though, so I guess.
I guess I'm just thinking if we can prevent another week or two delay, that just gets it on our doorstep that much faster. And obviously there's good merit for it with hauling trailers and such. So I guess what I was asking for, is there any exceptional circumstance that we're allowed to potentially have Warman Fire Rescue proceed with this prior to the next council meeting?
I can maybe answer that.
Sure.
Normal processes you saw with some of the other things that the other managers are reported on, they've already tendered and purchased, as long as it's in the budget, as long as it's under budget, and as long as it's not of a controversial nature, they can proceed with my approval. So a lot of them have. So Chief Austin could have just come to myself and we could have started with the process. So but also we provide that in a report to council of what has been purchased and why, and the background on it, just so council is aware. But those are the parameters in our purchasing policy.
Perfect. So you'll be at the office for the next 15 minutes? I think Russ is on his way. Thanks.
Yeah, he has. The only question I would have is he had $85,000 in the budget, so now it's 55 for the purchase, so I saved $30,000.
No.
Thanks for the clarification of the process there.
Yeah, that's the bones of it. So yeah, no, I appreciate your comments on it. It's yeah, I guess we can get it in the pipe. I just wanted to make sure, things being what they were, that there wasn't any major concerns from Mayor and Council, because it is not Russ's money. It is the people of Warman's money, and you are the purveyors of that. So I wanted to make sure that I was on side with that.
Thank you. And thanks again for all you do, Chief Austin. And I know every year we reach out to find out, do we need to be doing more in this area? And I mean, he reassures us, his team, where things are at, and we're so proud of all the work that happens in that area. And so we continue to try and get some of these areas covered that are concerns right now. So thank you again.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Your Worship.
Move on to the RCMP report. I'm not sure if we have anybody here for that, or if it's here just as information. Manager Smith, you know if there's going to be any representation, and I know Staff Sergeant Barry Thomas will be starting fairly soon. I don't think he's here yet though.
Yeah, I think that's the reason that there isn't anybody here right now, is we're waiting for that transition period. Also, I just saw a little message pop up that the existing Staff Sergeant, Jan Marcus, sent an email. I don't know what it's about, but maybe it's about this, but anyway, no, it's not. Okay. But yeah, if there's any questions on the report, I can either try answer them or certainly get the information back for council.
Councillor C?
I do have just one quick question. I think that in discussions that we've had, Manager Smith and also with Mayor Philipchuk, We've asked for these reports to be specific to Warman, not to always include Martinsville and Warman. As an example, is the report that you had given to us, Manager Smith, and it was excellent in what we were looking for. It's a little bit frustrating, and we'll give it the grace that there's a new staff sergeant coming in. I believe that starts today, but it's a little frustrating to see the same reports coming time and time again when we're asking for a little bit more detail and a little bit more to be broken out. I don't know whether it's just the time frame or it's that somebody just doesn't want to do it, but it's getting a little annoying for me that I think I've asked 3 or 4 times now. So if we could maybe ensure that they're giving us specific to Warman going forward within a couple of weeks, I would really appreciate it.
Yeah, so again, I think there might be some confusion. We can, you sit on the advisory board, so you can certainly have that discussion with the staff sergeant at that time. But these reports that we're providing are just for council's information. I think they're the same as what goes out to the media, just so that council had asked previously that they get a copy of it before or during or after it goes out to the media. So that's the purpose of this report. The report that you're talking about is more of a the comparison for that we always have the discussion with at our advisory committee, RCMP advisory committee, which we see them in 3 separate reports. What I did is I put them all together in a report that you had indicated that you were looking for. So there's kind of the quarterly report. There's these just, this is really the same report that goes to the Gazette and things like that as well. So we just passed on for council's information, but you'll certainly, have that discussion with the new staff sergeant at their next meeting, for sure.
Okay, thank you. And so we can have those clarifications dealt with at that time. Okay, we will move down. And again, if you have any questions specific to that, by all means, email Manager Smith and he can reach out and get those answers. We'll move down to our communications liaison. Aaron.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. You have my report in front of you. It's just a brief snapshot of some recent social media activity for the City of Warman. So I welcome any questions or any suggestions from Council for future pieces.
Any questions or comments? I think there's a benefit to being at the end. I think people are not as many questions left. So thank you. We're hearing no questions. Thanks for your communications. Again, if any councillors have reports or anything else that they need to some support, by all means, reach out to Erin. She's there to help, support, and get our message out there as much as we can. So thank you. I'm looking for a motion to move in camera now. To discuss our communications policy. Councillor Ramage?
Actually, just before we did that, just had a question of if on the next committee of the whole we'll have reports from economic development. Just looking forward to having those tabled for discussions moving forward.
I'm not sure if you want to answer this, Your Worship, or myself.
Well, I'd be glad to, or you're probably closer to it, so go ahead.
Yeah, so certainly that is the case. Our new economic development officer has been here a week, and he's done a lot of learning in this week and meeting people and having Zoom conferences and a whole bunch of other things. So certainly it will give him an opportunity to, one, get his feet wet, but also bring something relevant to the council. 1 week really isn't enough to put a report together of all the things that he has dealt with. So certainly at the next committee of the whole and going forward, he will be on our agenda just like all the other managers are. So, but I certainly have that for the next one.
So the answer.
Awesome. Looking forward to it.
Thank you. Okay. Motion to go in camera. Discuss communications policy. Councillor Seed, seconder.
So,
go ahead.
I'm just going to make the motion the council move into an in-camera session to discuss council communications.
And seconder. Councillor Ramage, you had your hand up. Okay. Any questions? Okay, all those in favor? Carried. Okay, and so everybody except City Manager Smith and our Katie will be on here.